live on YouTube right now.
No, I didn't just go.
We all said Audra?
Also in a practice session, so. We're on action right now.
Awesome.
And we're already live on YouTube through the room cameras.
Okay, welcome to the August 22nd, 2023 Town of Camden Select Board meeting. We are broadcast live on Spectrum Cable TV Channel 1303 and streamed on the web on YouTube. Also, we are streamed on Zoom. And if you would like to participate in the meeting via Zoom, please raise your hand and it will be brought to our attention. You can ask questions via Zoom. Before I get started into the agenda, do I have any motions to adjust the agenda?
I'd like to make a motion to move up the town manager's report to at least near the reports by the board members.
Second.
Motion made and seconded, discussion. All those in favor? 4-0, motion carries. So we will adjust item 10, manager's report. That will be moved up to immediately after or let's go immediately before item 3, select board reports. Okay. Item number 1 on tonight's agenda, public comment on non-agenda items. Do we have any members of the public who would like to make comments on non-agenda items? Seeing there are none, we move on to agenda item number 2, approval of the board minutes from July 26, 2023 and August 8th, 2023.
I'll move to approve.
A second.
Motion made and seconded, discussion.
Yes, I do have just a couple little things. So under the discussion about the moratorium, or the harbor ordinance amendments, in the second paragraph here, the third page of number 6C. Martin and town attorney will create a narrower scope of the moratorium, and the select board will continue looking at putting another measure on the ballot in June 2024 for voters to weigh in on banning the residential, or should be banning residential piers moving forward in the coastal harbor. And if that could just also read outer harbor as well. Under number 8, the manager's report, the town is receiving $1.3 million in funding to connect the Mount Recyclable Home Park. Should be, I'm sure that's just a autocorrect, kind of odd one, but probably Mountainside. Is it Mountainside Mobile Home Park or? Oh, right, because they changed is it the Mountainside Community Co-op? Okay. So that's all I had.
Anything else, board?
No.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Can we do it as amended?
As Allison has amended. All those in favor? 4-0. Thank you. Thanks, Allison. Item number 3 on tonight's report is, on tonight's agenda is select board reports. Town manager's report. Audra.
All right. So
So for those of you who were in town yesterday, you might have noticed early in the morning in some locations in town, there was brown water coming from people's faucets and appliances. There was a break in the water main on Atlantic Avenue, and the flushing sort of caused a bunch of soil to get into the system, and it made the water brown, from what I understand. We got a lot of calls about this, and we didn't really have a lot of information from Maine Water to pass on to people. And there wasn't really an alert system about this. So I think that, out of this experience, it would be beneficial for us to, contact Maine Water about, some opportunity to put a system in place, because really the only thing that we had to alert people was the text system. And we had pretty limited information at that point. And, we were instructed to direct everyone to a customer service number, an 800 number, and they didn't really have a lot of information about what was going on locally in the Camden Rockport system. So, I just think it's a good opportunity to speak to Maine Water about, maybe some way of alerting their customers when there's, something going on in the system, and a better way of getting information to us so we can pass it on to our residents. With the treatment plant project, we're coming to the end of that. And for those of you who weren't here in the beginning of that project, the way that it's been financed and funded is through rural development. And there's really three sources of funding. So there's the federal loan, and that's really the first component of the project that needs to be spent down. After that, there's a local match requirement. So that was about $1.3 million. And there's some of that that's going to be remaining at the end of the treatment plant project. And then the last part was a federal grant, and that's the very last thing that can be spent. And so the totality of the federal grant, which is $1.4 million, is going to be left at the end of the project. And I think that, we're going to need to start thinking about, other projects to spend those funds on, because rural development doesn't want to take that money back. And it's a really good opportunity for us to, purchase equipment and also do some capital improvements that really need to be done. And I'm glad that sort of Mountainside Community Cooperative came up through all of this, because they're kind of in a situation where they really need something done pretty quickly. And even though they were successful in getting, funding that was allocated as part of the earmark process just recently, we're not really sure when that money is going to become available. So, if we can expedite certain things, it might be a little bit of moving money from one source to another to make things happen more quickly. But, just starting to have these sorts of conversations about the projects that we've identified as priorities and we're starting to set aside funding for, what do you want to prioritize and what could we do quicker? There might be, I'm not going to say there are limits to what we can spend it on, and a lot of it will come down to conversations with our project administrator at Rural Development. But I think that, us having that conversation first and trying to figure out, what do we want to prioritize is going to be our best first start to that. And, that's something that we're going to want to look at within the next few months, because the project is going to come to a close. I'd say that, by the middle of September, it'll be complete. They've already demobilized the contractor that we have on site, and we're looking at October for some sort of, open house event to invite the community and just, wrap up the project. So, now that that major part of it's done, we can start thinking about, what we're going to do with the remaining funds. Another update for, the Montgomery Dam and the conversation that we had at the last meeting. We've received one quote from a masonry contractor, and that's been passed on to the Montgomery family. And we're waiting on another quote for landscaping. And so once we have a scope of work that they're in agreement with, we'll bring that back in front of all of you to have the conversation about acceptance of the funds and an agreement around that. So that'll be ready for September 5th.
What about the sluice gate?
Oh, yes. And the gate itself has been fabricated. So part of the quote that we have received is, in addition to the masonry work, the contractor would install the gate that's already been fabricated. The Siemens.
What was your original plan on
On installation?
on installation. Where was that money coming from?
Well, we were planning on, when we had the chance, our own Public Works employees installing it. Yeah, yeah. For the Siemens project, so just for those who aren't familiar with it, it was an energy efficiency upgrades to almost every town-owned facility. And one of the elements of that project that was sort of bundled in with everything was replacing the slate roof for the Opera House. And that was put on hold because at the time that they were seeking quotes from contractors, there was an agreement with the local contractor who, wasn't able to do the work. And when they re-quoted it with another contractor, the price of scaffolding had increased by like 200%. So Siemens was reticent to move forward with, those sorts of price increases. So we've had to negotiate a deal with them where they're going to pay the difference, which is about a $50,000 difference between, what was budgeted for the project and how much it actually costs at this point in time. But for those of you who remember, under a performance contract, there were to be no change orders. So they're acknowledging that they need to absorb that cost. So they're going to write us a check for that difference. And instead of them project managing it, they're also going to give us $15,000 to be able to hire somebody to project manage that job. So we're going to be able to move forward with that later on this year. And so that'll wrap up that entire project that we were doing, because everything else is done. And we also have the, I was going to call it an investment grade audit, but it's, where they went and they had to come back and just make sure that the performance matched with the energy savings that they said that we were going to experience as a result of the upgrades that they made to the building. So we do have that information now.
Audra, could we get the information, the Siemens
Yep,
audit?
absolutely.
Of-
Jeremy's actually, I gave him that report, and he's also looking at some of the other energy efficiency upgrades that we did, just to be able to compare, where we were at prior to those projects being implemented. But I can give you the Siemens report right away. I did a presentation, I think it was a couple of weeks ago now, to the West Bay Rotary about the impacts of climate change on subsurface infrastructure, which sounds like a really boring subject, but everybody was really engaged with it. And it ended up being, I think, really beneficial. And it's something that I think would be great, to do with the select board. A lot of you are familiar with everything that's in the presentation, but it's kind of, I think, for the benefit of the public. And, a lot of people who saw that presentation, they knew bits and pieces of everything that I said, but I guess it was sort of putting it all together. It was helpful, I think, in, just building their understanding of some of the challenges that we're facing in the coming years when it comes to the, the shape of our infrastructure and, what's happening to it as a result of handling so much more precipitation than it was designed to handle in the past. The Volunteers of America have started their contract work with Camden, Rockport, and Rockland. And Stephanie, she just happened to be in the office signing warrants when one of the VOA caseworkers was in, and he had just finished meeting with a client. So, I think it's something that's already just so beneficial to the town and so beneficial to our residents who really need that help, because, we're fortunate to have resources to help people, but without having that sort of person that's able to connect them to the services that are out there, it's just been a real challenge. And, Camden, we don't necessarily have the same volume of people seeking assistance that some of the other communities around us have. But I'd say that, a lot of the people that do come to us for help have very complicated issues. So having somebody to be able to, assess what their needs are and try to connect them with those services has just been really invaluable. And if that's just a few people in GA, I can't imagine how beneficial it's been for the police department, who's, seeing a lot more, areas where people need assistance, and having Volunteers of America there is helpful. So those are my updates.
How is the time allocated for this person, the Volunteers of America?
So it's 50-50 between Camden and Rockland, from what I understand.
And then between like time in the town office and say time at the police department.
So they're really only in the town office for GA stuff when we call them in for it. So they're primarily with the police department. So I think, today's a pretty good example where, I had somebody that I knew they had, more complicated needs than what I could help them out with in GA. So I called Randy and, Randy sent them over because they had, they were in the area today. If they weren't in the area today, we would have set up an appointment for them. But, it's primarily they're with the police departments and, GA is on an as needed basis because it's pretty infrequent. I think that might be a little bit different in a community like Rockland where they're working, where they might have a different setup.
It's great. Thank you. Allison.
Just a couple quick questions. Back to the discolored water situation. I've gotten a lot of questions about that and felt like it made me realize I don't understand as well as I would like to how the whole drinking water system works. It's obviously when the flushing happens, we're all used to it might discolor your water some, but what I understood from this is that it was the break itself that caused all this material to be pulled in, and then subsequently they were able to solve it by flushing. But how water from a water main break on Atlantic Ave, how that ends up turning somebody's drinking water brown on John Street. I've just gotten a lot of questions, and it used to be common for every so often the water company to come to the select board, just give a presentation about how things work, what their plans are. So that just may be something to consider in the future so that we could all answer questions better. And then with the wastewater treatment, we're coming in under budget. Did I understand that? We have money left over. So
Yes.
we were supposed to take down the fence to allow for the eventual river walk and public access to that site as part of the planning board approval. Is that something that is in the works, or?
We can put it in the works now.
So maybe before we conclude everything, or just a reminder about that. That's it.
Anything else? Thank you, Audra. Select board reports. Chris?
Well, one thing on the McGonagall River Citizens Advisory Committee has a presentation that they're doing tomorrow, August 23rd from 4 to 6 at Camp Bishopwood. And the intent is it's a conversation with two gentlemen from NOAA, and they're going to break down the National Fish and Wildlife Grant and what it means for the watershed project in Camden. So for people who are interested in that, I would encourage people to attend.
Thank you, Chris. Allison?
Yep, so the Conservation Commission meeting that was scheduled for tomorrow has been rescheduled for September 9th from 12 to 2. Summer is a challenging time for getting quorum in the middle of the day on all of these things. We also had a problem with the past Pathways Committee meeting for the same reason. Midco Solid Waste meets next week on Wednesday in this room. That will be the organizational meeting and some of the review of financials. One of the things that's going to be coming up is a decision. We're going to be needing to look at our next long-term waste contract. So right now we've been in this short-term time period where everything that we take into Midco Solid Waste goes, all of our municipal trash goes to the landfill in Norwich Walk, which is the least desirable solution on the waste hierarchy. Previously, it was all incinerated to make electricity. Because of the uncertainty in the waste world of Maine, we not being able to decide between different options, we're in the short-term contract to kind of try to get us to the next long-term solution. So anybody that's remembers the Fiber Right Eco Maine debates from years back and wants to start paying attention to that, it'd be a good time to get involved. The other thing, with all this rain, the transfer station had to do a lot more pumping of water from the quarries to the Camden wastewater treatment plant, which is by far our most expensive thing that we do other than sending trash to Norwich Walk. So we're looking at I was just looking at the year-end financials, and about $100,000 over budget on fees to Camden. So in some ways it's helping Camden a little bit, but it's creating a little bit of a budget crisis for Midcoast Solid Waste, or it will eventually. They have their own, we have our own undesignated fund balance over there, which is meant for this type of situation. So it's nothing that they're going to come, they don't need to come and ask the towns for extra money at this point, but bringing us full circle with the need for wastewater treatment advancements. So that is that for me. Thanks.
Is there a long-term solution for the water in the quarry, or is that the solution?
So, the previous solution that had really been kind of decided on was hook up to the Camden system and pump everything. With rates going up and all of these water problems, it was always known it was going to be an expensive proposition, especially because those fees will continue beyond the time when we can accept material into the landfill. So at least we have a revenue offset right now, but eventually we're going to have to close that. And the 4 communities are still going to have to pay for those pumping costs. So one of the things we started looking at is the possibility of treating that water on site in a specialized way that's designed for landfill leachate. It actually doesn't have most of the contaminants in it that we have in our municipal wastewater. It doesn't even violate any primary drinking water standards. So it's kind of silly in a lot of ways to be sending it over here just to make everybody feel good and then cause our sewer system to overflow on Bayview Street and
then cause us to have high rates of PFAS and it
oh,
just
well,
doesn't
there's
treat
the
for
PFAS
things.
is a problem. One thing that is very high in comparison to our municipal wastewater is PFAS, and the state is still figuring out what they're going to require for that. But in general, Camden we're going to want to reduce the amount of PFAS in our effluent, which means we're going to want to tell Midcoast Solid Waste that they need to find another solution, either for pre-treatment or for ideally treating it all on site at Midcoast Solid Waste and then being able to let it go through like a wetland type of system or something. Because we're looking at $300,000 a year right now in treatment costs to send it to Camden. It's only going to go up, and that's a cost that we all share, those 4 towns. So huge amount of money.
Thank you, Allison. Stephanie?
I have no report.
Okay, and I don't either. The MDIC and the planning board are both on a little bit of a hiatus at the moment, taking some time. I think early September.
September 7th.
September 7th will be the next
And
plan.
it's going to be, Granicus is going to do a presentation on short-term rentals in Camden.
Okay, so September 7th, planning board, short-term rentals.
And it's online only. They're doing it on their platform.
Online only. Thank you, Jeremy.
We'll get the address out there though, so people can watch.
Oh, on the Granicus platform?
I think it's Microsoft Teams.
Oh,
But yes.
is that going to be live streamed?
Yes, it is live stream.
Okay. The next item on our agenda tonight is the public hearing for liquor licenses. Item 4A, Camden Harbor Inn at 83 Bayview Street for renewal Class 1 hotel liquor license to sell and serve beer, wine, and spirits on premises. Is there anyone here tonight to speak on behalf of that? Seeing none, I turn over to the board.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. All those in favor? 5-0, the motion carries. 4-0. Item 4B, Camden Harbor Inn for a special amusement permit to go with their liquor license privileges. Anybody to speak on behalf of that here tonight? Seeing none, I move to the board.
Is that a new thing for them, or is that something that they've always had?
I think they've always had that.
It says a renewal.
Oh, thank you. I would move to approve.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. All those in favor? 4-0, the motion carries. Item 5A on our agenda tonight is town warrant, public hearing for town meeting warrant. 5A, the following amendments. 1 to Article 2.
Never mind.
I'm going to skip all the letters and numbers, terminology to add a definition for land attached float. Item 2, again, skipping the letters and numbers, administration to require site plan review for land attached floats. Number 3, performance standards for shoreland areas to amend the construction standards for piers to address sea level rise. And skipping from 3 to 6, to authorize review of land attached floats and approval criteria to provide standards for review of land attached floats. I'm going to let you take it from there, Jeremy.
Sure. Thank you. And this just follows up on many meetings that you guys have talked about these and the planning board and the harbor committee. This is also here.
Microphone is not on.
Sorry, there you go. Sorry. Following up on numerous meetings that you folks have had, the planning board has had, and the harbor committee. These are proposed changes, like Tom said, to Article or Chapter 290, which is the zoning ordinance, and Chapter 108, which is the harbor and waterways ordinance. We went through these quite a bit at the last meeting. They've been advertised. They're out there for the public to see. The planning board reviewed them. Harbor committee reviewed them. At the last meeting, I guess, Tom, I could keep going on the Chapter 108. It's very similar, adding a definition to attach, regulate land attached floats, to change the max height of piers in Article 108 from 6 to 8 feet. Adding, again, land attached floats and addressing sea level rise. This is for would be outer and coastal harbor and for consolidated piers as well. And then we clarified the process for permitting and the planning board and select board reviews. And at the last meeting, Allison inquired about public rights of passage. That standard is in there currently. Bill and I went through and we tweaked it a little bit, Allison. We felt that it works better. Currently, it says substantially block or interfere with public rights of passage and uses of the shores and flats. And we've proposed to change it to adversely block or substantially interfere with public rights of passage and usage of the shores and flats. And those words, adversely and substantially, are used quite a bit in the ordinance. But the way that we look at adversely, rather than substantially blocking, adversely blocking seems to be a better, I think, word to use, because that's something that the select board reviews and the harbor committee reviews. And I think that would address any adverse blocking of public rights, if you understand where we're going with that. Those are the changes.
Why not adverse? Why can't it be adversely block or interfere? What's the difference between?
Well,
adversely
substantially interfere is
substan-
used in multiple locations in the current ordinance. Is substantially interfere is used multiple times, that word. And without going through, the harbor, this is something we kind of put together on. We didn't go through the harbor committee for this. We kind of came up with these changes. And Bill and I, again, using the current ordinance, which has been used a lot, and current wording, which has been used a lot, we felt by adding the words adversely, replacing substantially with adversely and adding substantially.
Yeah, that's interesting.
helps.
It is already in there, although it's just never been a big part of the discussion, but
And I think the big part of the discussion is really based on the people reviewing, right? The select board now, I think, would look at adversely blocking probably differently than other boards may have looked at it.
right. They were like, yeah, that's nothing before us. Or,
Well, they
yeah.
could say it wasn't substantially blocking. Now it's adversely blocking,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
it's a matter of semantics and words. But
Yeah, okay.
so these changes, again, they will generally implement the harbor committee recommendations. while also the warrant article language, on one foot, standing there. The warrant article language will continue the ban on piers and other structures as we move forward. And then the planning board will continue doing their review. They're going to jump back into it right after short-term rentals on the September 7th. So
Do we have a way of wording, I'm sorry.
Please.
Do we have a way of wording this that will make it not too confusing for people? Because I'll admit that when I read, even though I felt after leaving last time, I really understood it. When I went to review it this time, I was back to not sure. I was like, did he trick me by putting something in here? I mean, it's just hard.
definitely not trying to trick you.
I figured.
This isn't the warrant language that you're seeing yet. These are still, this is the public hearing of the ordinance amendments. So you will see the warrant language coming together. So I assume Bill and I will refine every one of these to make sure they're appropriate. We think this works, but if you have any issues or questions, we'll take your thoughts, obviously, and you have that opportunity to change it when it's before you as a warrant article itself. But if you see anything before that, let me know, will you, please?
It's just with the refining or the new moratorium, or I guess what we decided is we don't need to do a new moratorium. We can leave the
Correct.
existing moratorium language.
Yep.
And these things, the only things in the ordinance, if approved by voters, that will actually go into effect are the things that are
Correct.
not impacted by the moratorium, but isn't everything impacted by the moratorium?
No, remember, we wanted to make sure we could regulate land attached floats. So that is
Right.
now in, so we've solved that problem.
Doesn't the moratorium include a moratorium on land attached?
It
Oh, I
does.
see what you're saying.
It does.
So since we've provided a solution for land attached floats.
Correct. And we've provided a solution for raising the height only for damaged piers or those that need significant repair or replacement. So this is not applying to new piers.
Okay.
That's why, provided, however, the moratorium ordinance enacted on the date prohibiting construction of new residential piers and other structures, with the exception of land attached floats, shall remain in full force and effect. I guess we could clarify that section to include something about the when they're replaced. We tried to do that up above. When they're damaged or they require significant repair replacement, I guess we could add some wording down in that last sentence, Allison, to clarify it. But I think we're good. Bill thinks we're good, but we'll make sure we're good.
But it's accurate to say that even if people vote yes on this, they are not voting yes to allow new residential piers in the
Correct.
coastal and outer part.
Correct. That is true.
Is there any way we could write that? But
We can,
I don't know. It's just,
remember, we also do a note on these things too.
yeah.
Below the warrant article, there's always a little note. We can clarify it in that note
It
as
just
well.
makes my head hurt. Like this possible warrant article language, it just,
I understand with the
My head.
pain that you feel when you look at that. I feel it too when I draft these things. So.
Jeremy, before or after this warrant, this potential warrant goes to the town voters in November, do we need to make any adjustments on the present moratorium?
No.
Okay.
Nope. No, this is going to keep that moratorium in place, but this is going to allow certain things to happen, like repairing or replacing an existing pier, and it allows us to regulate land attached floats.
And remind me, how long do we have on the present moratorium? When does that run through?
February?
I was going to say February sometime. So likely we'll have to probably extend it again to June, or do a special town meeting to adopt changes. I assume you want to adopt those changes that the planning board has contemplated. I mean, we got to go through the whole process. But if we get to February, keep in mind, March, we're generally, by February, we have to have stuff for the most part ready to go to June, because by March, we're, here we are again, like in this position. So by February, I think we'll have to have the planning board work done. So you at least, when you extend it then, there'd be legitimate reason to extend it. It's to codify it at the town meeting in June, what the planning board has recommended, would be my
Sure,
guess.
if we extend it,
If you
that
extend
sounds
it,
good. I
yeah.
just wanted to make sure we all had a good idea of
Yep.
what the potential
February.
timeline.
Yep.
Okay. Chris, anything?
I'm good.
Stephanie, any questions?
I just went back through and reviewed the last meeting, and I think we had a meeting before, and I think your proposed warrant article actually sums it up pretty simply. I would caution about adding too much more into it, because I know when I get into the voting
Yeah.
booth, I'm not reading it like
Yeah.
word for word, or, I mean, it's pretty clear, concise. I'm good with how it is, so I look forward to seeing how you have it.
The notes can be very simple too, the couple of sentences below each warrant article that we can clarify it even further. If we leave that language the same, I think you'll be happy in the end.
Will we see the notes in 2 weeks as well as the warrant article?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, generally that's how we do it. We
Okay.
approve those. And you guys look at the warrant article and the notes.
Thank you.
I think there had been some hope too in the past of doing, getting back to doing some kind of newsletter around that time that helps people understand. I know that's a magic word around here, newsletter.
Magic
Means
word.
different things to different people, but some of that could help too. I was looking back at old ones that Roberta done, and so it doesn't have to go on the actual ballot language. It can be a little more explanatory.
Do we have anybody from the public here tonight that would like to speak on this issue? Anything else, Jeremy?
No, those were the hearings on those two that dealt with the piers. And then we have another hearing, if you want me to keep going. It's
Yes,
that
please.
last one. All right. And this is an amendment to Chapter 290, which is the zoning code, Article 8, district regulations. It's to amend restrictions on certain multi-level multifamily dwellings under certain conditions in the B1. And as you know, we've been working on the state's mandated affordable or state's mandated housing rules, which include affordability. They include a provision for mandating accessory apartments, and then there's a provision for increasing density, mandated increased densities. We were also staff, Shenley and I, and Clint and Audra, we've been working on, obviously there's some challenging properties, Knox Mill for one. There's a prohibition currently on street level residential in the B1. You don't want your street level in your downtown core to be used up by dwelling units on the street level. And determining street level can be very challenging. Our definition of street level is, I think, a half a page long for a definition, so it's kind of quirky. But that prohibition on residential at street level is great in the downtown core, but there are certain other properties, again, Knox Mill primarily, and even Brimstone going up a little bit, that aren't really the downtown commercial core, retail core, if you will, that have existing dwelling units. And there's been a struggle to redevelop that portion of that building. So we looked at it and came up with an amendment. It's a very minor amendment, actually. It's a handful of words and a couple little, I think they call them superscripts. Sophie would tell me if I said that right or not, if it's a superscript. So, but if you go to the residential uses, this would be in 298.8. Following residential uses are allowed. And there's, again, this exemption on residential on the first floor. But what we're adding is, and this is to an existing language, the restriction on residential use on a floor at street level shall not apply to structures in the Chestnut Street Historic District, that's currently, or to structures located on lots that lie wholly north of Megunticook River that have both pedestrian and vehicular access directly onto Washington Street, are located within the B1 and are in the town's downtown TIF district. So that would cover everything north of the Megunticook River going up to Brimstone on the left-hand side. So that covers the smokestack building, Knox Mill building, and then Brimstone. This would also apply to And I included a map. You asked for a map, Tom, the other day. I included it in your agenda.
The smokestack building on Mechanic Street?
Excuse me? I mean, on Washington Street. I'm sorry. Sorry.
Okay.
Would not.
It would not on
Not the
Mechanic,
Mechanic Street
correct.
side.
I interpreted your map backwards.
Oh,
So I was
Really?
like,
I thought the map was pretty good.
well,
I loved
was,
having the
I
map,
was
but it
a
took
little
me a little bit.
confused with it, but that's just me.
So on the map,
Sure, it was just me.
the red dots would be Brimstone Consulting, Knox Mill, and the Smokestack Building. And then the blue dots are properties that are B1 that are also in the downtown TIF and in the Chestnut Street Historic District. So it would apply to those properties too. And we had an inquiry from the school department about possible uses of the Montessori school up at the corner. So they're in support of this proposal. The folks at Knox Mill Condo Association's in support of these zoning amendments. And it would free up, give more opportunities for multifamily in the downtown at street level. And we think it's appropriate because they're not really within the downtown commercial core, if you will. Go ahead, Allison.
So the discussion about the conversion of the Knox Mill to condos, the residential condos that we currently have, was a very long, drawn-out negotiation. And the big sticking point for everybody was that, yeah, they were going to allow a developer to make a ton of money with condos on the upper floors, but they had to keep the bottom commercial. And there are many who would argue that just letting the residential units that are there now it led to the demise of the Sea Dog, the smokestack. It creates a difficult business environment when you have, it's really the very definition of gentrification. So I can see compromising on that some, but the goal in my mind would be to create units that are affordable. And as far as I can tell, this would just allow for the continuation. I understand that the current owner maybe would be, actually, no, we don't know because we're about to sell it.
I think we're
So-
the current owner, so.
What?
I think we're the current owner.
Yeah, so we're saying, I was thinking about the other side. We're saying that we think more condos, just like on the upper floors that are going for exorbitant amounts of money right now, just more of those on the first floor is appropriate. The problems with development of commercial units in that building on the first floor are complex, but it's mostly been because it's been tied up in the bankruptcy, receivership, all of that chaos. And so with that now going on the market and creating an opportunity, I don't see that now is the time to say, okay, more high-end condos would be just fine there. Why would we be doing that right now?
Well, I don't think there's anything that forces it to be high-end condos if you change this. And I agree with you on the gentrification, but that's one of the reasons why I didn't want to go up Mechanic Street and have it apply in all of the B1. I certainly don't think that's appropriate, having multi-street level or street level apartments going up Mechanic where Jack's is and where the print shop is and where Serendipity is. That's clearly should be retail. But I think times have changed and the needs of the community have changed. And if you look at the comp plan, it talks about, you can go both ways with this. But I tend to agree with the planning board, especially now where housing is such at a premium. We have a significant challenge. And this, again, just gives someone an opportunity to add residential units. They can be apartments that are rented. They can go as condos. There's no difference in our zoning ordinance when you look at apartments. It's a multifamily dwelling. Again, I
Why
think,
not direct it toward what we're saying? If the goal is availability, then why not direct it in that way? You know what's going to happen. Those are expensive units.
Well, I
There.
will say,
Allison, that there's no chance they're going to be developed for retail purposes. Just, it's not going to
40
financially.
paper, I think we're all happy to have 40 paper there. Beauty
Well,
Mark
I
was
would
fine
say
when it was-
that it's just, if you do the math in terms of what they have to pay in association fees for any of those commercial units and what they would have to charge in rent to make it work,
well,
they're just not viable for
The
commercial.
association's going to have to change their
They're
model
not
there,
going to
but-
change it though. So I mean,
Is this a request from somebody? This feels very like request.
honestly, I think it's something, instead of trying to manipulate the market to try to end up with something that is going to make that building vacant in perpetuity, I think opening it up and seeing what is the appetite in the market to do something there, if it could be residential, is a much better way to go about it than just artificially sort of
Sure.
depressing what could happen there.
But why not have
Is there
it?
a rush to do this? I mean, so
I think there is some interest in some housing there. I do think that there is interest in doing some housing there.
we're the intention of the town is still potentially to
that's-
put it on the
that's kind of-
market?
One of the conversations we're going to have tonight is about the changes in how you have to dispose of tax acquired property. And I was hoping that by having that conversation, we could talk a little more about what you want to do. Do you still want to list it to be sold, or do you want to do something else with it? Because as commercial units, it's just not a proposition that's going to be, it's just not financially viable
Well,
to anybody who would want to.
I think that the market would tell us that. I mean, if we decide to put them on the market as is, which is with the restriction of commercial, we'll know pretty quick whether there's a buyer interested in developing that for
I'm sure you
commercial.
can find an interested buyer who isn't going to do they're going to try to buy them cheaply. They won't do their due diligence about the fees, and we're going to end up in this situation again in a few years. And I just think that that would be very frustrating for everybody involved.
The association has already said they might have to adjust the fees. This seems, I don't
They're not
agree.
interested
This sounds
in-
like there's a larger conversation to be had about the Knox Mill and what the restrictions are and selling it, but changing the zoning of the town before we have that conversation is premature. We're doing something to help with the sale. What we're doing right now is to help with the
I guess we
sale of
always
the
have
Knox
these
Mill.
speculative, it's not necessarily the Knox Mill. It's this whole area where we don't allow for any residential, where we could, and if we did, there might be things that would happen.
So the other area is Cuzzies. So we all know there's a significant conflict in that area with residents, so on Chestnut Street. So the exemption to the no commercial on the first floor in the Chestnut Street Historic District, that's the backyard of Cuzzies. And so we have one property that's been able to take advantage of that, which used to be a commercial building and now is residential on Chestnut Street near Cuzzies. There are significant conflicts with the commercial nature of Bayview Street, and that being like a place where people want to go at night and play music. And so encouraging the proliferation of additional residential uses there that could be high-end residences,
The Chestnut Street Historic District already allows single family and two family at street level. There's a provision that exempts them if they're in the Chestnut Street Historic District. This adds multifamily to that. So now you can do multifamily at street level. Currently in the Chestnut Street, if you're in the B1, I just looked at it before I came in, you can have 1 and 2 family at street level in the Chestnut Street Historic District currently. So this just adds multifamily to that mix, which you want more dense in the downtown. I mean, the comp plan speaks
this
to
is
that.
right next to the
a lot.
post office, though. This is really,
What's that?
why can't we just combine this with the affordability covenants that put restrictions on short-term rentals and all of that stuff that is in line with what we say we're trying to do? A couple additional seasonal high-end condos downtown benefits very few Camden residents and potentially hurts the existing commercial uses by adding more people who are trying to sleep where everybody else is trying to have dinner.
The overlay zone applies down there as well. If someone wants to do an affordable housing project, that applies for the most part anywhere we can do multifamily, which is anywhere in the downtown area.
So we already have that covered.
We already have that covered. Accessory dwelling units and the short term, we haven't tackled that as part of the new law yet. And the board wants to talk about short-term. Planning board is doing the short-term rental discussion. At the same time, they're going to start trying to figure out how to address the ADU law that the state passed, because I know that they just don't want to carte blanche take what the state did, because there's no provision for short-term rental to regulate short-term rentals in that. And certainly, the planning board's concerned about short-term rentals and accessory dwelling units. We've added, since we tweaked the zoning ordinance a couple of years ago, I think we've added 15 or 16 accessory apartments. Currently, they're required to be primary residences. That's hard to regulate. But I do think going forward, probably for June, there will be, planning board at least will propose regulating short-term rentals in some fashion and addressing accessory dwelling units the same way, and making sure they're not just going to turn into short-term rentals.
Well, let's look at this then.
And there's outside of Knox Mill, and I do think that the school department is supportive of this project because of issues they're having. They own the Montessori school building up at the corner of Union and Elm. This would support a project that they're looking at doing. So I know that
turn the Montessori school into housing.
What's that?
There's a rule that they have to give it back to the town if they're not going to use it for school purposes.
The school district's
State law.
well aware of that, and they're making sure they're going to be using it for school purposes. I think the town is probably well aware that the Montessori school is being relocated somewhere. That's out there and has been out in the community for a while.
So this is all a larger community discussion. I feel if we're making these changes for a few properties that require a larger community discussion, in my opinion.
We're
But
changing
I said-
it. You're changing it for 1, 2, 3. What's that? Like 15 properties in town.
And some massive ones, though.
The planning board had a couple of workshops on it, and they were supportive of it. If you guys don't want to move it forward, that's fine. I think I think providing people an opportunity to reuse buildings that are currently not being used to their fullest is appropriate. It doesn't say it has to be apartments. That commercial use can still happen over there. If some developer comes in and says the highest and best use for that is office space, they'll make it into office space at Knox Mill. It's just giving more people more opportunities. That's how I see it.
But we still haven't even put it on the market. I'm getting questions from people all the time about when that's going to become publicly available. And so I just agree with Tom. It would be nice to go through the process of making it available with the existing zoning there, and then rather than changing it ahead of time. And if we are going to have housing, don't we want affordable housing?
Dozen people, developers, since I've been in Camden, and every one of them has talked about doing residential at Knox Mill. No one has talked about doing commercial there.
It's so lucrative. People are making so much money on this. Of course, that's what they want to do if they can, but the town needs them to try to do something else. And if they are going to do housing, it should be affordable rental housing.
Well, we do own the property. I mean, I think we can put some conditions on any purchase and sales agreement that we have with someone. So,
Jeremy, have you heard anything from the people at the Knox Village Condo or Brimstone Consulting? Is this something that they are
Knox
desiring?
Mill Condo Owners Association has been asking me about doing this since I've been here 5-6 years.
But Brimstone?
I haven't heard from Brimstone. I mean, it's an established consulting firm. I don't see them going anywhere or changing the use of that building at all.
Okay, and anything from residents on Chestnut Street about the desire for this?
Yes.
I have not heard of anybody. I know Keith May has inquired about the vacant lot that he has adjacent to the post office, and this would allow him to do a residential building there. It would allow him to do a single family currently. I don't know. There was some confusion that he couldn't do his residential there and that he had to do some commercial downstairs. But currently, the ordinance as it reads allows him to do, because he's in the Chestnut Street Historic District, allows him to do residential at street level.
That is it, Jeremy, that's a very strange it's not a contributing property to the Chestnut Street Historic District.
Right, it
It's a
doesn't see that.
non-contributing.
Right, we don't have a historic preservation ordinance. We have historic districts that have been approved by the feds, right? And so this falls within the Chestnut Street Historic District. It doesn't say anywhere that we don't have any ordinance that says something has to be in a contributing property.
I've been in the planning office for discussions about this when it's come up, and that, obviously that logic has changed. I just don't see why we're trying to incentivize more high-end housing in Camden, right, in downtown
We're
Camden
trying
right
to
now.
incentivize high-end housing. We're trying to incentivize housing. I'm not saying anything about high-end. The planning board is not talking about high-end. I understand where the market goes sometimes, but we're trying to provide opportunities for people
I
to
mean, we can't even do
redevelop properties.
affordable housing if we keep things
I mean,
exactly
we
how
tried
they are.
last year, 2 years ago, we tried to do affordable housing at the tannery. I mean, it just doesn't happen.
So, I mean, in my opinion, this boils down to a couple of things. One is we're looking at available housing. So your suggestion is that we change zoning to create more available housing.
It creates an opportunity for someone to make some more housing. It doesn't mandate someone to do housing there, right? It just adds another use to a property. That's what it does. It doesn't say it has to go to housing.
Sure. Allison's argument is we had a robust discussion about zoning, and we always have robust discussions about zoning, particularly at Knox Mill. I remember that being newspaper headlines quite a bit many years ago. And this one hasn't gone through that.
Mhm.
I agree with Allison that this ought to be something where we really consider and make a long and considerable thought process that goes into how we want to implement available housing and affordable housing in Camden.
I would say that every single time anyone has ever brought up anything for increasing housing density, increasing affordable housing, there's always an excuse not to do it.
But that,
Always, every time. I can't think of a time where we haven't talked about options for increasing the amount of available housing, increasing housing density, adding more affordable housing stock, and we've every single time come up with a reason not to do it. We don't have any more tools in the toolbox. We've brought everything we can to you. So if you want to do housing stuff, we can, we can rehash all these things, but we're really coming at the end of what we can offer you for solutions to this problem.
I respectfully disagree. I think that we have, don't we have something coming before us about greater density, accessory
Yeah, I mean,
dwellings?
that's the state mandated requirements.
Yeah,
Those
so-
are going on ballot
But
in
we
November.
really don't have any choice over that.
Right.
That's because the state has said you have to do this.
That
And
could
it's
have a
because we have these same conversations where solutions are offered and everyone comes up with an excuse for why it can't happen.
But-
And I'm just saying that we are never going to, as a community, move the needle forward with increasing housing supply and addressing any affordability issues if we are constantly told that is not the solution for Camden. Because I can't think of any solution that has been offered in recent history that's been seen as appropriate for Camden.
Well, I mean, I do feel like we should see the results of this thing that is moving forward. It is going to be on the ballot, and I believe it's going to pass. In addition to that, I've had good ideas. I've heard good ideas, excuse me, not had, heard, about places that would be appropriate for apartments in Camden. One of them, and I don't know who owns it, if there's any movement behind this, is the lot that's between Subway and Hannaford. To me, that would be a completely appropriate place for an apartment building. It's accessible to downtown. And if we were to make a zoning change, say in that area, and we would have had a robust town discussion about that, I believe you'd have broad support for that. This area here, people do want a commercial area downtown. I was in Portsmouth, New Hampshire this past weekend, and that is a vision for me of what Camden could be. Grass on the waterfront, not a parking lot, and just a downtown that's full of commercial businesses that attract people. And if we eliminate this now, it's never coming back. I mean, we can vote for that. We can do it here tonight. We can put it on the ballot. People can vote for it. But I would think that this should be something that gets a broader public discussion than we've already had. I think this is the first time this was really come before the board with any significant discussion anyway.
I appreciate it. I will say, it seems like, I mean, being with the planning board for the last 6 years now, it does seem that I think how engaged some of the community is now as opposed to in years prior is very different. Very different. I mean, this has been discussed at the planning board with multiple workshops on it. We had a public hearing and not one person came, right? Not one person came to any of those meetings to ask questions about it, have a discussion. You know, you've been to some of the planning board meetings. I mean, the public doesn't come. We advertise them the way we are required to. We put it out there. We send the notice or the email of the meetings to 100 and some people in town that that are on the planning board agendas. And those have traditionally been all those people, I think, that have come and had, were very active and engaged on a lot of these topics. Why people aren't coming and having these discussions with the planning board, I don't know. But I mean, we're doing, I think, what we can. I mean, we had at least, I think 3 meetings and a hearing talking about this one at the planning board level, and no one came. The school district came. They've spoken in favor of it, and I got comments from Deb Chapman, who was was the former chair of the Condo Owners Association, and I met with her for years about trying to do residential in the mill building at that street level. So this is what we came up with. I mean, I tend to agree with Audra that, we have looked at these. We have, put together some amendments that we thought were appropriate and didn't get rid of, that prohibition carte blanche in the downtown at street level residential. This is in unique areas of town, I think, that aren't in the downtown core, commercial core. So, I mean, we can continue the conversation if that's what you guys want to do. That's fine. We're just trying to be as proactive as we can. I think the planning board's trying to be as proactive as they can when it comes to housing, knowing that we need all sorts of housing in town, market rate, affordable housing, workforce housing. We can do that. That's fine.
Allison.
I think everything that Tom said was like really makes me feel really enthused about having the conversation, because that's just one example of an idea that gets kicked around to me all the time too. And it seems like as a town, what we've done is we've looked at trying to solve the affordable housing issue by looking at what the town already owns and then fighting about that, maybe to the tannery, maybe Sagamore Farm. We do seem to know that when we look at these big projects at town-owned parcels, especially the ones that are currently vacant, that is just too exhausting of a conversation for the community, and we're not making progress by pursuing that. But looking at strategic, very small sort of parcel level areas that could be rezoned to incentivize things. I mean, other places have apartment buildings. That's how they solve this. They have multi-story apartment buildings, not just, 1 or 2 multifamily dwellings here and there. So is there a way, I guess to say this quickly, is there a way for us to be able to, have a conversation with the planning board and with town staff where we can look at, and instead of just remembering all these other times when ideas have been shot down, to say, hey, you guys said you don't want to do this, but this is the gamut of tools in your tool chest. Which ones would you want to pursue? And so we could kind of restart the conversation a little bit too. It feels like what I'm hearing is that, okay, we've decided to do this. We've given up on everything else. So we've just, you said you wanted more housing. So here you go. This is what we can come up with.
Well, no, this is one thing. I mean, I think if you go back to the accessory dwelling unit amendments a couple of years ago, We added that, right? We did that. That
It's all
brought us
really small
15.
stuff.
Well, I think people forget that in the downtown or in the village zone, you can do multifamily apartments. But people aren't doing
But you
them.
can't have like a 4-story
You can.
building with,
You can. And you can also, I mean, look at the buildings owned by, Chip Lade owns a bunch of apartment built complex up off of Lime Rock. He's
those
looking,
are great. And the Weymouths have all these properties too. Why aren't we looking at like how they can make those places more dense or, I guess it just
they
feels
are,
like we
and
need a
that's,
broader
and that's what the
conversation.
the density changes that are going to voters in November are going to facilitate someone like, Chip Late to be able to add some more dwelling units over there. There's somebody that is looking and interested on a property on Cobb Hill Road to do what you're looking at. There are people looking at doing it, but,
But that same person would also like to be able to do more dense apartments at a place like, around John Street or that lot that, I mean,
that's if they're getting, that's, I mean, I
we're
think
not
this is a
aware of some
big,
of this stuff.
I think this is a big conversation. I mean, there's tax credits and there's a whole host of things that go into this mix.
I would say, we're at the point now, we got to try everything. We really have to be doing almost everything if we want to make any progress on this. And it's not just us, it's every community around us, particularly service center communities with sewer and water and other utilities and with downtowns and jobs and services. And, it's got to be a broad brush approach to this or we're never going to make any progress on the issue. And I guess, we're sort of getting to a point where we've tried things, we've proposed things, and it seems like none of them are a good fit for Camden. And if we're constantly told that none of these are a good fit for Camden, we're just not going to be able to make the sort of progress that we need on this issue. And yes, we got to do all the things that you're talking about, Allison, but there's a lot of other things that we need to do as well to try and make any sort of headway on this. So this is just kind of one thing of so many that we thought would be worth looking at.
If someone came to the planning board workshop and said, whoa, this is not where you need to go. I mean, I think the planning board would certainly, have listened to that. But the planning board, I think they're of the perspective of we need to give people opportunities. And again, nothing mandates that these become, dwelling units. It's just another use that's allowed in those zones.
We haven't
That's
even
what it
tried
is.
putting it out to the market to see what, it may be that at the end of this, I am convinced that, okay, yeah, I didn't look at it from that angle, but to me, this feels like too big of a decision with too much square footage at play and too much history to just recommend it tonight, that there's nothing urgent about making sure that that we can do condos at the Knox Mill or.
Well, I mean, that's fine, and I hear it, and I get it. I think what's important, though, is that the select board, I think you need to be nimble enough and quick enough, because if we do put it out there, and my gut says is someone's going to come in and say they would like to do housing there. That's what I think is going to happen. And our answer to them is going to be, unfortunately, no, you can't do it there. And then they're going to say, how do we do that? What's that?
Come with an awesome proposal about exactly what they want to do that's going to benefit the community, and we can adjust the zoning accordingly if the people of Camden agree that it's in everybody's best interest. We could do that, but just that more of what we have there right now, expanding to the first floor, I can't see how that would benefit, would be the highest and best use of that.
And I don't think, I hear you, but I don't think there's anything that says expanding what you have there, what is there currently, is what's going to happen. I don't think there's anything that says that that's what is going to happen there.
There's also nothing that prohibits it.
Stephanie or Chris, do
Led
you
me
have
to believe
anything
that.
you'd like to add?
I don't.
No.
Any members of the public that would like to speak to this Chapter 290 housing? You need a vote for us to whether to carry this forward to the ballot,
Yeah.
as written or as in this draft form.
I'll make a motion that we approve the proposed amendments to Chapter 290, Section 818 as proposed.
Do we have any second? The motion does not, so the motion is denied. Thank you, Jeremy.
All right.
I would say that let's,
Yeah, I mean, it's not going anywhere. We got to
get
deal with this
back on the
issue.
agenda as a broader
You know,
discussion.
There were some good questions, and I don't know what it's going to take to get better answers. Or what would either be satisfying to the discussion on which things come. We don't want to get to the point where we're doing only spot zoning for certain things.
Right. No, that's true. And that's why we expanded it.
Mhm.
It's not just on one property. It's multiple properties. So it's not spot zoning, but I understand.
But the motivation started with,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Actually.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you for the effort,
No problem.
in all your efforts. Moving on to the consent agenda tonight, the let me see, how many items on the, two items on the consent agenda. The consideration of renewal for the victualler license for the Sea Dog Brew Pub at 1 Main Street, and the consideration of an application for War Memorial Post 30 American Legion to use the Village Green for POW MIA Remembrance Day ceremony on Saturday, September 16th at 2023 at 10 a.m. Do we have any objections to the consent agenda tonight? Comments? None. Therefore, the consent agenda carries. Thank you. Action items tonight. Action item 7A, approval of memorandum of understanding between the Fire Department of Camden and Hope to provide administrative support for EMS to the Hope Fire Department. Chief or Audra or Chief Farley, would one of you like to introduce this subject?
Sure. Well, Chief Farley's walking up. I can just explain it really quickly. So this came out of the joint study that Camden and Rockport did with the hospital system on EMS. And part of the recommendations that came out of the report that the consultant prepared was for the towns to start first responder services. As you know, Camden's got a program up and going. And the idea was that not every single not all four of the municipalities had to get their own EMS license, and that we could partner, and some of the other communities could use a license of the towns that were able to get going quicker. So Hope would like to take advantage of that model and partner with us and stand up their own program off our license. So Chief Farley can give you any details about that.
Audra pretty much summed it up, but we did acquire our license from Maine EMS back in March. So we started up our program in late March. In June, Chief Keller approached us and asked us, said that he would like to expand, start offering EMS in Hope. And just based on the recommendations from the report, we chatted with the folks at Maine EMS to see how to make that happen. And so we would need to amend our license so that it geographically covers the town of Hope as well as the town of Camden. And this MOU is just something that they asked us to put together so it explains each other's responsibilities so that we can amend our license application to include the town of Hope so that we can provide admin services. And like I said, the memo, Chief Keller still provides all the operational functions in the town of Hope.
What are the admin services that Camden would be responsible for Hope?
So basically it just allows us to amend our license so that the town of Hope doesn't have to go through the licensing process.
How much does that cost?
The license fee is $100 a year.
And can Hope not afford that? What's the benefit to Camden?
Chief Keller's full-time job is over at Rankins. And it took us 8 months to get our license from Maine EMS.
Is there a reason why this needs to happen? Is this related in any way to what's going on with the county or with any long-term issue with our current service that we pay for?
This is based on the implementing recommendations in the report that the 4 towns in the hospital asked for in 2020. So we're just implementing some of those recommendations. It has nothing to do with Anything else other than implementing recommendations in the EMS report?
Which like working together, and can you remind me of?
The big recommendation was starting the first responder programs.
I can just read this one just real quick if you want. This option also recommended a fire-based first response unit be formed in the 4 towns, and an initiative with 1 town serving as the main EMS licensee and administrator. The same or another town providing the EMS chief, but all 4 towns benefiting and soliciting members. The 4 towns would contribute to a small fund to cover insurance, licensing, and other admin costs, but would individually budget to equip and pay first responders for answering calls in their towns.
So yeah, it's the
So it's just-
non-transporting first responders where, if somebody has a medical emergency, we can respond locally and we're not, waiting for the ambulance. So Hope would be able to do that, with their fire department in Hope under our license.
Okay, so it's just instead of 4 towns right now, it's just 1 town
Yeah.
signing on to that. Is there, we already have mutual aid with our fire aspect of this. And so is there a benefit to, obviously it was decided in this report that there was benefit to mutually working together on the EMS side of it too?
Yes.
Is that the benefit to Camden here, rather than just saying, Hope, we're not ready to do the 4 town thing, so you should just do it on your own? It's better to just work
The
together.
benefit to Camden, I guess, is that there will be licensed EMS personnel in the town of Hope that can come and help
Right.
us.
Okay, that makes lots of sense.
Yep.
Thank you.
Where are the other 2 towns on this initiative? How do they feel about Camden's program?
I could talk a little bit. I mean, Chief Farley can fill me in, but I know Lincolnville, so Clarence, fire chief in Hope, even though he has a full-time job doing something else, he is a professional.
He is a licensed EMS responder.
Yeah, so he's got that background and that interest. So he's, he has the ability to get that program going in Hope. In Lincolnville, their fire chief is also somebody who's, got a full-time job doing something else. And his interest isn't EMS to the same extent that Chief Keller's is. So, there's not really the same, I guess, interest or momentum in Lincolnville to stand up their own program. And in Rockport, they've really been focused on major changes to their fire department. So going from an all volunteer fire department to, the sort of combination model like we have where all call division model to a combined, some professional firefighters and call division people. So I think that they're still trying to figure out what the best solution is for them, given the changes that they're going through right now.
Right.
Do you think there's anything to add to that?
No,
or-
fair to say, Hope has more licensed EMS responders than the other 2 towns do. Yes. So they're just a little bit further ahead. And
How many do we have? How many does Camden have?
10 with 2 in testing, and 10 with 2 in the testing process.
Chief Farley, can I ask a couple background questions? So before we had this license, we have EMS people who are part of the fire department. They arrive on a scene and there's EMS that's required. What did they do at that time? Were they not allowed to do any EMS work?
We need to have the agency license from Maine EMS,
Okay.
so it will permit them to.
But now,
We didn't have very many EMS licensed people up until basically this report is when we started educating people.
okay. So now we do. Now we have the license. So now when your crew arrives on scene, they can do emergency medical services.
Yes.
Okay.
We get simultaneously sent to most of the calls along with Northeast,
Okay.
along with our EMS provider.
Okay.
Transporting.
So right now, if there's an emergency in Hope, nobody can do it other than Northeast. Camden can't do it and Hope can't do it because they don't have a license and we don't have a mutual aid agreement with them, or whatever this is called. This.
Hope licensed people can't do it in Hope currently, correct.
Can we do it in Hope when we
We
arrive?
could do it in Hope if Northeast asks us to go to Hope.
Okay. So the immediate benefit for this is as soon as we bring Hope under our license, then Hope could respond to their own and they could respond to ours.
Yes.
Stephanie,
have-
yeah,
yeah.
please.
I just have a few things. So I actually see this as a really great thing. I just am a little bit, I don't feel like I'm up to date as to what exactly Camden is providing for one. And we haven't had an update since March. You said that Clarence came to in June. That would have been a really great time to come to us and say, hey, we have this on the table. We're working through this. This is where we're at. This is how many calls we've gone to. And I would also like to hear from Northeast to hear how that relationship's going. You know, what's going really well, what's not going so well. Do they like the calls that you're choosing to respond to? Would they like you to respond to more when you're showing up? Are you providing really great service? I mean, we just haven't had any of those discussions. So for me, bringing on somebody else into this program, it's not a bad thing. I'm just personally not at a spot where I can say our program is going really great, and this is what I know about the program. I mean, right now we just went through a week of a failure in a system that we thought the program was running well, and the oversight just wasn't there. I don't want that to happen here because we haven't asked the right questions or we haven't been given the right information to know that the relationship wasn't quite where it could have been, with the small tweaks that it could have been better. I would like to hear and have kind of a more informal discussion about where we're at, and get more people to the table to discuss, like Northeast to the table and our program people from Camden. I'd love to hear from Matt Heath. I'd love to hear from some of the volunteers that we have that are responding, and just hearing about our program to find out what is actually going on and what's happening.
So I think
Is it
we're,
at the select board level or in
Yeah.
that? Okay.
Yeah, at a select board level. I mean, we've had that update from other people. And it's really great to have an informal discussion and just like have a discussion instead of just kind of firing off one-off questions and making people feel like they're just under fire. It would just be great to kind of sit down and say, you know, this is where we at. This is how many calls we've had. These are the calls that really haven't worked really well. These are the calls that we feel comfortable responding to. Just kind of finding out more about where our program is, because I think it's a great thing. I just don't think that the community knows 100% where we're at and what's really going on with it.
two separate things. What's going on with us? Commissioner Glazier can talk to you about what's going on with the RCC when that comes up on the agenda. I wouldn't be standing here if I didn't think that, and suggesting that we do this, if I didn't think it was something that we could help make successful in the town of Hope. We have been to 177 EMS calls this year, 161 since we've had our EMS license. We, in my mind, what matters most to me is how Camden's firefighters are interfacing with the crews from Northeast. And from my perspective, it could not be going better. I'm extremely pleased with the way the crews are operating together and the service that's being provided to the community. We have been to incidents where our firefighters were first on scene and witnessed a cardiac event, witnessed a cardiac arrest, and immediately provided care for that person. I'm extremely pleased with the way the program's going. Northeast is happy with it. Our mutual aid partners are happy with it. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
What hasn't gone well? Most things don't go perfectly. It would probably help our understanding you to know what the challenges you had. What didn't go well?
I think that the challenges are I mean, there are always going to be administrative challenges, and the challenges are admin issues and having Northeast follow through on things that they've told us they would help us do. And when that hasn't happened, we've gone to our mutual aid partners and we've made it work. And we've got the things in place that we need to have.
I would say the whole licensing process was challenging as well.
Bear in mind, all of this is governed by the main board of EMS. So, you know, we have to meet their standards and their protocols. Every one of our calls, our folks do an incident report on, and somebody does a quality assurance review on that call. Every single one of them. That's, bear in mind, you know, we have, in order to maintain our license, we have to meet main EMS standards and protocols. And when our license comes up for renewal in this fall, they're going to be looking at all those things again. The main EMS board is made up of 16 folks, fire chiefs, emergency room doctors, nurses, 16 people across the state who are appointed by the governor. We need to meet the protocols and standards that they set. We're doing it.
Allison, please.
So, I mean, I think it would always be nice just to have more presentations about more things in town. I always fall on the side of wanting more of this in meetings, and we have the agenda time limits to contend with. So, I mean, I would definitely be supportive of, you know, Stephanie wanting, you know, just to have a basic presentation so that we don't, you know, when somebody does want more answers, we don't like have to seize this opportunity to be like, okay, we've got him. Now I can ask all the questions I want to related to the other thing. So that sounds like something that would be good for everybody for a future just informational agenda. It does seem to me like a great sign that, you know, I have a lot of respect for Chief Keller for all kinds of reasons. So the fact that, you know, Hope wants to partner with us, to me, is a sign that things are going well. I mean, it sounds like there's a clear benefit to Camden, a clear benefit to Hope. The more people that we can have licensed and trained to respond to these types of things, the better. So, I mean, I'm totally supportive of this, and also interested in, you know, more information at some point and learning how we can even improve things more, I guess.
Do I recall correctly that we were going to have some sort of discussion maybe in September concerning EMS at some level? Do I recall that correctly?
Yes, we have discussed that. We haven't put it on any specific date to that workshop yet.
Yeah, I think
We said late September, correct?
Like relative dates, but nothing
Yep.
specific.
I think the agreed upon was late September for an EMS workshop.
And there was an executive session, maybe?
At some point, yes, to discuss services.
Right.
Yes.
But that's not related to this. That doesn't need to.
So I do have a few more questions. So as far as the licensing goes, and in what you read on the EMS agreement with the hospital, said that everybody was going to put in a fund to pay for the insurance. So one thing to point out is that Hope would be carrying its own insurance, and we would be carrying our own insurance.
It's identified in the memorandum of understanding, yes, that we will both be carrying our own insurances.
Correct.
Yep.
So if there was to be, and the only fee that Hope will be paying us is $250 for any administrative services at all. And there will be no fees or charges for provision, no other fees.
As it's written now, right? So if Hope were to start, this is for 6 months, right? So the license fee is $100. And we figured some time to do the quality assurance of based on the number of incident reports that they would need to have gone through the QA process. That's how we came up with that number to cover the cost.
So this is for 6 months, not a year. I think in here.
The way that Hope has their budget, and Clarence didn't want to go back to the Hope Budget Committee because he had given them numbers and he didn't want to change it halfway through the process.
Has Maine EMS approved them to be on our license already?
No, we need to amend our license. After Clarence asked to do this, I had a conversation with Audra. Clarence had a conversation with the administrator, and then we called Maine EMS to get guidance on how we would move forward. And that's the memorandum of understanding is the first step in the process of moving forward to amend our license. So they're not doing it yet. Wouldn't be able to do it until it was approved by Maine EMS.
So then there isn't any reason that we couldn't get Northeast in the same room with us so that we can hear them just kind of have the same conversation just to say everything is going well. Because Chris, I've heard multiple times where people have said that Camden isn't getting to the calls as quickly as we had hoped that they were. And I understand that you've gotten to a few of the calls sooner, but I just would like to hear the Northeast just confirm that everything is going well. That's it. I mean, I think it's a great thing to bring other people in, but I think that Camden has this license that is a precious commodity that you just explained. And we just really should make sure that when we move forward, that we have all of our cards on the table and that we're moving forward in a great way that is going to protect our license, our liability, and all of those things. I mean, we're in such a litigious state in this whole country that lawsuits are thrown around just by looking at somebody the wrong way. So I just am, I don't know what I don't see that there's any rush to do it right now. If we could just get people together so that we could feel better, and the other people in the community that has reached out to me with these same questions could just hear that, yes, everybody that is in agreement, because if Northeast backs out on the transport service, then we're up the creek anyways. We have a license that we can't use.
That is, I wouldn't say that we have a license we can't use. Our license is for non-transporting. The onus,
Right, but
there's
in the main licensing,
no race
it
for us to get
says-
to any incident. It's the onus is on Northeast. They have the responsibility to Maine EMS to transport patients. I haven't heard any feedback that we haven't responded to any calls in an appropriate fashion. And if that is out there, I'd be happy to hear that. I have not heard it.
So in the main EMS licensing format that I read that's available online, it says that to have a non-transporting license, you have to have an agreement with the ambulance to do the transporting. So if we have a non-transporting license and we don't have an ambulance that can transport anybody, then basically our non-transporting license isn't viable, really. We're just holding on to it till we can sign on with another ambulance
I wouldn't
service.
say that, I would say that we would probably then pretty quickly get an agreement with whoever the community decides to provide their transporting service.
This actually happened in Bodenham. their ambulance service left and it was Northeast and they had a first responder program and they kept going from what I understand.
They have other options down there that are just readily available that they jumped on board with to be able to do their
They
Transport.
didn't though. They just kept going without.
So they were performing emergency medical services with a non-transporting license,
I
and
think
they were still doing it even though that violated the
yeah, and
conditions
then
of
I
their
think
license?
Mutual aid just came into the transports, like from what I understand.
Allison, if you have a question.
If our current provider were to go away, I would imagine whoever the next provider would be reaching out to us to make that agreement with us so that we can continue to provide the service.
Allison,
just-
please, let Allison, I'm sorry.
My understanding is that we have a contract with Northeast to provide the totality of those services. They're responsible for everything as in terms of, responding to all of these incidents, and that what we're doing is based on feedback from the past that maybe that although they were meeting the standards of their contract, there was a higher level of service and response desired by the community. And so we've been working to provide that by increased training and increasing the capacity of our departments. So I guess I'm not understanding why it's important that we hear Northeast's review of how well our fire department is doing. I mean, that's why we have the EMS review committee to review Northeast and how well they're doing in meeting their contract. And then we as a community decide based on any, additional response that we want to be able to provide. We're trying to do that as a community, and anything that we can do to improve that, unless people start saying, oh gosh, there are just too many people responding to incidents. And I just preferred it was so much better if it's only Northeast that can come. I guess I'm confused about why we need to have Northeast in here to hear what they think about how well our fire department, first responders are doing.
If the onus is on Northeast. If we don't get to a call because we're busy at a fire, there's no penalty to us. If Northeast has a contractual obligation to respond, we don't have
Is
that.
there a scenario where you're concerned that
No,
Northeast
I'm
is going to
just-
say they're getting in our way and we could do a better job?
No, I'm just
better
thinking
before?
about the totality of it. So Chris just said that he's responded to 161 calls. So how many of those were calls that you were there to offer help? And was that help received well with Northeast? And I just feel like since Northeast is our administrator over the whole program, having their input to me just seems,
Well, Northeast is not the administrator over the Camden Fire Department's non-transporting license agency. Okay? Two separate things. They have a license from Maine EMS. We have a license from Maine EMS. They don't administer anything over our program. Okay? So that's two separate things.
Northeast does the quality assurance for us, and they
In
are
the
our
contract, it
EMS
says
director.
Northeast will do the quality assurance. It's not been my experience that Northeast is doing the quality assurance.
Who
So
does
that's
that?
why I'm saying that we don't know how the program's even really working to say, yes, let's bring somebody into a program that we don't 100% know exactly what's.
We're taking care of the quality assurance.
So you're doing your own quality assurance?
We have somebody who's doing the quality assurance for us, yes. We have brought somebody on board as an employee who is a paramedic who's doing the quality assurance for us.
That's within the job description of a paramedic, and it falls within the main EMS requirements for that?
I wouldn't be doing anything that didn't fall outside Maine EMS guidelines
So-
and protocols.
So but that's,
Yes,
yeah, okay, you're telling me yes.
yes.
Okay.
But our MOU states that Northeast, I mean, I'm not trying to grill you, Chris. I'm just trying to understand what the program is, how we're
Ask your question,
operating.
I'll answer your question.
So, I mean, right here, it says that Northeast will provide our EMS director and quality assurance review. That's stated right here in the MOU that you have written up. You said with Bill Kelly, who was our attorney, with the whole fire department. So now you're saying we're going to ignore that part of it. And we're doing our own quality assurance.
What are you reading from?
The MOU
So
between
in
Camden
the
and Hope.
contract, we're mixing up a bunch of different things. In the contract that the town has with Northeast, it says that they will provide the medical director, which is a physician, and they will provide, which they do. They are, their medical director is on our license as being the medical director. It says they will provide quality assurance. Audra and Matt and I went and met with the leadership in Northeast in January, and that was one of the things that they said they would do. I've asked several times, it hasn't happened. So we went and found somebody else to go and do it for us. It's getting done. It's been getting done since we started.
What is it going to take to get, I mean, I know we're a little off topic here, but it's a good topic. What is it going to take to get Northeast to step up and do this service that they're contractually obligated to do?
Is it in our best interest that they do it? Can somebody explain to me exactly
It doesn't
are
really
we better
matter.
off
I
if we
mean,
do it ourselves?
it
Because
doesn't matter. It's very common for services to do it themselves. Rockland does it internally. Northeast does it internally. I'd say most programs across the state have a staff person who internally does their quality assurance. That is,
Except that we're paying them to do it.
Are we?
That's part of their contract. That's,
Is it is part of the,
Northeast contract.
it would be,
not part
the
of the
contract price would
add-on.
be the same if they did it versus if they didn't do it.
Yeah.
so is that something that could be put
You
on
know,
an
we
agenda
put-
for the EMS
I guess-
review committee?
go ahead,
So the
Allison.
EMS review committee reviews the contract with Northeast, right? So is that something that could be
Yep, I
Put
think that's
on
a good idea.
there to let them review whether that's something that should be
Mhm.
pursued and sort of separate from this?
I'd like to take a moment to just summarize this. I agree with Stephanie. I think that we do need like a broad perspective of where our EMS programs, a lot of good questions have been brought up. And maybe that would be something we could schedule. I mean, we've talked about it. Let's actually hard schedule it maybe at the end of the meeting tonight if we have time and we can jive calendars and invite Northeast, of course. Get some of your personnel here, Chief.
Yeah, yeah.
So given that, I think that this is the mutual aid, we have a good agreement with Hope. We have a good relationship with Hope, as we do with all the surrounding communities. I just want to be clear. If we don't pass this and there was an emergency tomorrow in Hope or Friday, whenever it actually gets signed and implemented, Hope would not be able to perform their own EMS services. Is that correct? They'd have to wait for Northeast.
Correct.
Okay, so that's the immediate benefit of passing
I
this
would
tonight.
say that passing it tonight, like Chris said, this is just a first step. We have to go through a whole process with, main EMS and licensing to add them onto it.
But this speeds that process up.
This makes it.
It implements this
It
process.
initiates it.
Okay,
I think
initiates
is a
the
good way of
process.
putting it. So really the only impact this is going to have if you don't do it tonight is on Hope, because they just get held up from moving forward. It really makes no difference to us right now.
Right.
We already have our license. We're going to keep doing what we're doing. It's
But
just-
potentially Camden if we were to need mutual
No.
aid from Hope. And-
Well-
But it's not an immediate thing. It's not like
But-
you approve the MOU, boom, they're on our license. Like this initiates that process. So like I'm saying, it's just going to hold it up for Hope and hold up the possibility of us being able to work together if there's a call. It's just kicks it back to be a little bit.
And then the one other point that I'd like to bring up, and it's a broader concern, but we talk about this, say, with the local, dams is a great, where we maintain the dams, but Lincolnville and Hope benefit or don't benefit from the dam, depending on your perspective. We took a lot of time to, I imagine a lot of your time other staff time and your time to get this license, right? So I love Hope. It's a great town, but I pay taxes in Camden. I'd like to see that reflected in these agreements. That, Chief Farley had 100 hours doing this license. And if you're going to tap onto it, that's reflected. Hope taxpayers do pay taxes as well. And they pay taxes for services just like residents of Camden's pay taxes for services. So I don't know if we should hold this up tonight, but this is after this 6 months, maybe this is something that should be brought into the discussion. And that is the auditing, the accounting for what it took Camden to go ahead and get a license like this. And if they want to come on our license and if we decide that we want to accept them into our license, we have to accept that there's some administrative costs that came to the taxpayers of Camden. And those should be passed on to the towns that want to be on our license.
Had this conversation with Hope 2 weeks ago today. They understand where Clarence was in his budget process and where we came up with a number. They asked where we came up with a number. They understand.
Okay. So can we have that reflected in the 2024 budget if we're going to bring in more towns to this? Okay. Board, anybody from the public that would like to speak on this issue? Seeing none, we move back to the board. Board, any other comments or discussion items?
The only thing that I would go back to is just that verbiage. If we know for sure that the MOU is incorrect, I would like to have that changed just to,
On the quality assurance piece, you mean?
yeah, before we even put it through to anybody. If we know that, who is doing the quality assurance?
But if we were going to try to hold Northeast accountable for doing it, then.
Well,
Agreed.
but if we agree, the vote would be to agree to this MOU. So,
Which has that language in it.
which has that, I read it directly from here.
Could we maybe just leave it as is for now and have you guys review whether it makes sense to have Northeast?
This
that
will
or-
be put to the main EMS board as a licensing agreement.
We
That
could-
be changed
We can
over.
also pass this, or we can also vote to pass it with amended language.
That's all I'm trying to say is that we should have it updated to what we know is currently.
Sure. I
Being
mean, if you'd like to
That's
make
what
a
you think we should do,
motion,
then I
with
don't
amend-
know enough to know. if
make a
that's-
motion with amended language, I think we can do that.
Who is doing our quality assurance for Camden right now?
It's one of our employees.
Board, anything else? Any motions?
I would move that we approve the memorandum of understanding with the town of Hope.
I have a silly question. I'm sorry. It's a silly question. Why don't you say who that is that's doing it? Why did you say one of our employees? What's the concern? I don't get it.
It's one of our employees.
Does it change? Is that?
Well, is there the proper segregation of duties going on and level of understanding? I don't know because we don't know one of the employees
It's one of our employees who is properly licensed.
for EMS. And
Yes.
that's all it takes?
Yes.
And they've got how many years of experience doing that?
They have over 20 years as a paramedic.
Okay. Think you. I do like those additional details.
Call division employee, right?
Yes.
I think probably one reason to not give names is it causes, like, there's an instinct to go out and interrogate people sometimes, and that maybe that's just,
Well, we have a motion. Do we have a second for the motion that's on
And the motion was for, again,
What was?
to pass,
with the amended language.
not with the amended language. It was just to pass it as a memorandum of understanding as written.
but if that wasn't really intent, I will defer to other expertise. If you want to amend the language, if you think that's the right thing to do, I am totally on board with that. I just don't have enough knowledge to know that.
Stephanie, do you have a motion that you'd like to make with amended language? Because I know that you have a broad background in this.
I mean, I'm not really the one that made the motion to.
Well, there's no second for this, the motion on the floor.
I wasn't meaning to circumvent any effort.
We
to-
should
we're
not
making.
say that Northeast is providing the EMS medical director and quality insurance if we know for sure that we have an employee of the Camden Fire Department doing the quality assurance.
And that we think that that is the way that we want to continue. I guess that's where I was just not sure.
And I'm not necessarily saying that's the way we want to continue. I'd be happy to work with Northeast in doing the quality assurance. It just hasn't been being done. So we found another route to get it done. I'm happy if Northeast will help us do it.
That's why I wanted your group to
I'm more
review
than
that.
happy to work with anybody in
Sure.
Northeast to.
But that's understood, Chief. I think that what I'm speaking for Stephanie, that she wants this to more accurately reflect reality, the disagreement, which is, you've said the reality is you're doing your own inspections.
And again, I would just like if John Powers picks up the phone tomorrow after watching this and says, Chief, what do we need to do to make sure that we're doing the QA? I don't want to exclude him from being able to do that.
I don't think this would. I think that's still part of his contract. I just think it's
I don't know what it is.
recognizing reality.
And at the same time, I want to work with our current transporting EMS provider to make sure that we're having the best relationship that we can. And I don't want to exclude them from doing something that they might step up to the plate and say,
So
How about this?
Yeah.
Okay, so that, I feel like that paragraph fulfills that need really well. And it can also reflect the reality of the situation where after the Northeast Mobile Health Services, comma, which provides an EMS medical director, because they do provide that. And then we strike and quality assurance review services and just leave it at that.
I think
Because-
that had to be in there for the main EMS license. I think we should have Bill Kelly chime in on that because on the license with the state, part of the requirement is to have a quality assurance.
We already talk about that above in the paragraph. So, whereas Hope requires Camden to provide administrative services for Hope for program oversight, licenses, run reports, and data required for quality assurance review through Camden and Northeast Mobile Health Services. So right there, those are all the requirements of main EMS. It's saying it goes through Camden and Northeast, but it's not saying who does what.
Right.
So that's left kind of open. And then the comma, which provides, because they do provide the medical director for Camden, and then we just get rid of the rest of it. And that, I think, does everything that we need it to do tonight.
Sure. I do want to comment on one thing that you said, Chief, and that is Camden is not the one, when you say maintain a good relationship with Northeast, I mean, we're not the one that's leaving the other one hanging. If they're not performing the duty that they're required to in their contract, we're not the one that's jeopardized this relationship in any way whatsoever. It's them that's done that. So my interest in maintaining a good relationship with Northeast means that they step up to the plate and do their job, not that we keep holding our breath that they will. So I'm willing to pass it either way. I definitely see Stephanie's point. But that to me that argument to me is, yeah, I felt like I had to address it.
Just making sure that in the end it gets done, because even despite disputes with Northeast or however that might happen, we want the end result for Camden residents to be a positive one, even if sometimes
So-
we have to step up to the plate.
Also, I just want to point out that this is a agreement that is unending. It's not a 6-month agreement on number 4. It says renewed unless terminated by either party. So that's an unending agreement. Just so everybody understands that it's not a 6-month, it's not really a 1 year, it is an unended agreement, which I'm not against. Again, I think this is a great opportunity to seize. I'm just I mean, we've had a lot of discussion right now that I feel like could go into a broader discussion should we have the time and availability of more people at the table. So that's all I'm saying. And I'm,
Either party has the ability to end the agreement, though, correct?
That's right. Just 60-day notice, that's correct.
So that could be brought up by this board to do just that.
And you feel that you're ready to take this additional responsibility on?
Yes.
I guess just to be very clear, like just to state it again, of all the other towns that we could sort of partner with and kind of bring onto our license, I mean, Hope has the most experienced chief that's guiding this process. So, it's not an additional, they're bringing as much to the table as we are in this circumstance, in my opinion, given Clarence's background.
They have the most experienced chief, the most number of licensed people, the fewest number of EMS requests.
What are the potential negatives of doing this? What are the potential problems of going forward with this?
The Hope Select Board has approved this MOU.
Yeah. What are the potential problems?
Like doomsday if Clarence wasn't there, like
No,
worst case scenario.
Yeah. What might go wrong?
I guess I really haven't looked at what could go wrong.
Are our folks that we have at the fire department, they're ready to do this, you say? We're not depending on any, you said we have got 2 paramedics now, right? Or how many paramedics do we have? 1 or 2?
We have one who regularly responds to incidents,
Okay.
and one is doing QA for us.
Okay.
So a potential is that we could be using qualified Hope firefighters to fill for per diem shifts at the fire department. So it's a way to strengthen the relationship between the 2 organizations and the 2 communities.
Allison?
I guess I'm just a little bit worried that anybody listening to this is going to be, especially perhaps anybody from the town of Hope, might feel like a sour taste in their mouth when, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but this to me seems only like actually a very positive thing. This is not my world of expertise at all, but that has not stopped people over the years, not in a while, but many before that said they felt like the response at certain emergencies was inadequate, and specifically firefighters who felt like maybe they could help, but they didn't know if they should when they arrived first, and that awkward position of wanting to be able to do more, but not knowing if they should or not. And so having more people who are already responding to emergencies like fires and car accidents and all of them, having more people in adjacent towns in a position where they can give assistance is a really positive thing, and exactly what our citizens are asking for. And the only way to be able to provide that well is to work with other towns. Some things we do have to do on our own, but I think it's really wonderful that they've gotten to a point where they feel like we can move forward to take this just a little bit further. And like, I would just hope that anybody from Hope listening, feels that. I mean,
Hopefully the people
I'm
from Hope would say
concerned-
that we're trying to make sure that everything is set, that the positives and negatives of doing an agreement like this have been thoroughly discussed and thought about, so that
oh,
to
sure.
ensure that things that we would take on is something, we've got the capacity and the capability to take on before we go ahead and do that, and that we understand what the positives and negatives are of going ahead or doing nothing.
And I'm not saying that it's not important to have that other part of the conversation. I just think that a lot of the time with not just this agenda item, but many of them, because proposals come to us that have been thought out or whatever. And then our job is to kind of make sure that we feel good about everything that's being proposed. So sometimes we're necessarily in a position where we're asking what the holes might be, and there doesn't end up being the time to say, hey, this actually, is positive, and thank you for bringing this to us as an opportunity for both communities. And I don't want people to feel afraid to bring this kind of thing forward because of it being so unpleasant here.
So, sure. Mr. Dodge, please come forward.
As you can see,
Welcome.
I'm Brad Dodge. I'm from Camden, but I'm on the whole fire department. We do work with Camden a lot, fires training on fires and whatnot. We have another training coming up here with mutual aid. So I think this is a good thing that we can work with it for EMS. We do have, 4 people on there that does it already. And we're going to have 2 more that's taking the classes right now. So I might be speaking out of turn for Clarence, but, all this bickering back and forth, it ain't going to help us at all.
Thanks, Brad. Thank you.
I'm just going to say that I'm not going to apologize for making it a discussion, because I think it's very important that the community understands the program that we're offering, and that we are going into this in a world where people are a little bit paranoid about the programs that are being offered and given. So there's nothing that I'm going to apologize about asking questions and wanting to have clarification and going through an agreement of another town that's using our license, because that's a precious commodity that we need to protect. And I started this off by saying that I think it's a great idea. I also really just feel like we need to have a larger conversation. I'd like to sit around that table and just be able to lay it all out and have everybody hear what's working and what isn't working. Because if we had known that Northeast was not doing their quality assurance at our last meeting, it could have been something that we brought up, but we didn't know. So now we're here talking about it, and it could have been something that was being discussed if we had had the opportunity to have a broader conversation. So I think it's an actual really great thing. We just need to understand what we're offering for a program.
Stephanie, if we commit to a EMS workshop in the near future, given that this does have, when we start this process, if we start this process, it has a tangible benefit to Hope in particular, but also a side benefit to Camden, that they can provide services in our town. Would you feel comfortable moving this forward, knowing that we are going to have that discussion?
Absolutely.
I guess, can I ask you, do you all feel like you have a clear understanding of what we're asking you here and what this is going to look like and what it means?
Yes.
Okay, good. I just want to,
You can provide a synopsis, that'd be fun.
sure,
Think that
yeah.
maybe we don't at this
Go
point
ahead,
based on the.
Well, no, I just want to make sure that none of that got lost,
No,
because
that's fine. I think it's a good thing to make sure to give us the, 3-sentence summary.
so
that
so here you go.
So the public can hear it.
So Camden went through the licensing process with Maine EMS to have a non-transporting first responder program. And part of doing that, we have the opportunity to bring a neighboring community onto our license so they can start their own program in their community that works very closely with ours. And this MOU would be the beginning of that process. Is that a good, quick?
Nice. Nicely done.
Thank you.
Can I get a motion from the board?
I'll make a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding as it currently is.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion?
Were we going to strike out
Oh,
and quality assurance review services of
You're
Camden?
right.
We
Yeah,
have a motion.
right.
We have a motion made and seconded.
Can I amend that motion or no?
Sure. I see I see the will of the board wanting to make a amendment to the motion. So go ahead.
Can I amend the motion to approve the MOU to add the language that quantifies the level of quality assurance that Northeast is or is not doing?
Or was it to remove? Was it the language that Audra suggested
It was-
based on Stephanie's?
Yes.
It was, which,
You just
what
want to remove the last 7 words in that sentence. Is that
it
correct?
is, chief, is the words and a quality assurance review.
Okay.
So EMS Medical Director Services for Camden, and we'd eliminate
Very-
1,
Yes.
2, 3, 4 words in there.
Only took a half hour for that. Awesome.
So we have a motion made
I'll renew my second.
and seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries 4-0. Thank you. Good discussion.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Item 7B on our agenda tonight is fiscal year 2023 carry forwards. Audra?
Yes, so this is a yearly process when we have accounts that we'd like to carry forward the balances for, it could be capital projects where we haven't completed them yet, or other items that we haven't spent the money on yet. So does anybody have any specific questions about any of the items on the list? We try, over the years, it's been a real project of Jody and mine to kind of get the list narrowed down. It used to be quite extensive.
Now, the repairs to the Montgomery Dam at $28,000 that we've not yet spent, will that go towards some of the work that is being estimated at this point? In other words, we know was the $200,000 gift, but if we've got this money in the budget, why aren't we using that?
So that would be, for example, what we would have used on the, the gate.
Yep.
We talked about, wasn't excavating, but removing some of the sediment from the impoundment. We could use it for stuff like that. So yeah,
So that could be used
yep.
for that.
Hold on.
And then the Pearl Street, the bigger items on the bottom are on the bottom of the list with the
Yeah.
drainage project in that 337, for example, that'll cover some of the current bill that we're about to get.
Yes, yeah. So it's just because it wasn't all spent at the end of the financial year, but it will definitely still be applied to those
Yeah.
project costs.
Allison?
With the Montgomery Dam, why is there $28,000 from last year? I don't remember that much being,
It was the $30,000 that keeps getting put forward.
no,
part of
the
that.
$30,000.
2024.
Was,
What
Current
was
financial year.
2023? How much was in the 2023 budget for the Montgomery?
Oh,
Dam?
that's a
think
good
this is a
question for
mistake.
Jody.
The 28,000 has just been an ongoing carry forward where there's been appropriations every year. It hasn't been spent and it gets carried forward for that. And that's just like the year-to-year operational costs of the dam, which there has not been a lot of expenses done.
that's combined with the Seabright line though, so, and it has gotten spent in the,
Can I ask a question about how we bill Public Works? Public Works is at the Montgomery Dam on a regular basis. Does that ever come out of the Montgomery Dam budget, or is this?
no.
Oh, okay.
No, we pay the Public Works Director a stipend to maintain or to oversee the Montgomery Dam.
And that does not come out of the Montgomery Dam budget.
That comes out of the dam's operating budget,
Okay.
one of the carry forwards.
He does need help down there occasionally.
Yeah, I mean, and that was the thing with the wastewater, removing it from the wastewater department, because before it was just wastewater employees, and so all the wastewater users were.
Right. That was,
Basically
that
absorbing
was
that.
a really awkward setup when wastewater was overseeing it because, when it's public works, it's all general fund expenses. So anytime employees are down there, at least we know it's all coming out of the same group of money. It's being raised the same way. When it was with the wastewater department, that was particularly awkward because that was really ratepayers could make the argument that they were, underwriting the maintenance and the ongoing operations.
Operations, yep.
Yeah.
Right, because that dam control agent stipend, the idea of one person being able to do all of that isn't realistic, and so is inevitably meaning wastewater employees and now public works employees. But it seems like that should be, we should be looking at how to allocate some of that money from leftover repair money.
What you
to-
could do, you could, instead of rolling that into the operational budget lines, we also have reserve funds that you could carry those forward you could roll them into the reserve funds.
It
So
seems
that's an
like it should be
alternative.
offsetting the cost of our public works budget to taxpayers. Like, we have employees that are budgeted to work on all these different things, and then we have a fund that we use for the dams. It should reflect that that money is like being paid as a revenue source. I know different departments, you don't normally like to have individual sources of revenue, but the harbor, theoretically, the public works department should be able to charge for services. I know occasionally they do it at Midco Solid Waste, and Midco Solid Waste gets a bill. Can't they also be sort of giving a bill to the dam, to the Montgomery Dam account, or whichever dam it is? Or
I mean, you
I just
could, but it's just a weird, given now it's all general fund money, I guess where it would
I guess really we just shouldn't be carrying forward as much. Because that would be the same result because that's money that doesn't get carried forward, rolls back over into the unassigned fund balance, which is returned to taxpayers.
I'm always in favor of taxpayers knowing where their money's going. So if significant amounts of money are going to the operations of the Montgomery Dam or anything in town,
The other dams too, because
yeah,
that's,
anything in town,
Right.
if that's where the money's going rather than general fund, I like it. But I understand there are accounting limitations. So I'm actually in favor of carrying this forward and just trying to continue to improve how we, allocate and define how we allocate services.
because it's really kind of part of the public works budget in some ways. I don't know what the solution is, but maybe we could just suggest that you for the future.
we could do a chart of accounts change again, where we're, instead of being under the leisure services area, they get moved to.
It really should be part of public works.
I think that would be the easiest solution. Is we can certainly transfer that into the public services
Right.
line or family.
Yeah, because we'd already talked about combining what was it, Public Works, and it was like the highway, streets, and bridges into one, and we could move the dams over into there as well.
Because wages are getting taken out of, we budget for wages for all these public works employees, and if they're, we're budgeting money for the dam too, it should.
Yep, that's all very doable.
On the transfer of the various street paving, et cetera, goes to streets and sidewalk reserve?
Mhm.
How does that work?
Are you talking about, so you're on the reserves now?
Mhm.
Okay. So
Transfers to
this
reserves.
was request per our Public Works Director that these unexpended balances would be put towards the Pearl Street project, any overcharge, or what do you call it?
Over budget.
Overruns. And I'm not quite sure if he had any additional street paving that hadn't been done this year. I wasn't sure if he was going to make it here tonight or not, but
It's, the paving for Pearl Street, that's going to span a couple of financial years. So there's going to be some paving that's done, in October, and then they're going to have to come back in, the summer to do the final course of paving.
Mhm.
So that's why he wanted it in a reserve account, because it's going to straddle
Okay.
those 2 years.
Anybody from the public that would like to speak on fiscal year 2023 carry forwards? Board, any other comments?
I just wish that we could change storm sewers to storm drains. It's a comment I make every few years, but it's confusing to people because the sewer system is separate. Ideally, we know it's not really, but storm drains and sewers.
I can change that. If
Oh,
you want.
wow.
It's not,
Great.
I don't need a,
That's not a charter change right there.
no. So you want storm drain?
Storm drains.
Just for the future of the budget and just to trying to separate
Complete
those
sense.
systems. It's almost like,
We should be consistent with our own jargon, right?
it's like we've given up storm,
is.
sewer, whatever. It's like- all goes to the harbor anyway.
Can I get a motion of any type?
I would move that we approve the FY 23-24 carry forwards as presented as presented.
I'll second it.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries 4-0. Thank you. Thank you, Jody.
Thank you.
Agenda item 8A, Knox County Regional Communications Center discussion. We have Commissioner Glazer here tonight. Thank you. Commissioner, could I ask you to come forward to podium? Audra, can we just get a brief intro on where we stand town-wise on this?
Yeah, and I'd just like to thank Commissioner Glazer for coming as well. This is wonderful. It's, you've all been very responsive to everything going on there, and I think everybody sitting here really appreciates it. So, I think there's been a lot in the media about what's going on, and I think just to kind of summarize, their staffing levels got really low at the Knox County Regional Communications Center, and there was some talk of, having to close the center, and a lot of people, put in a lot of effort to try and make sure that didn't happen. And Ed can tell you what they did. I'll let him step in and explain all that.
Thank you. I don't know exactly where to start, whether we start with the problem or we start with the solution, or whether we hit the high points of what we're doing now. As Audra said, this has been a problem that's been building for a number of years. Staff has been underpaid for a number of reasons. One, and it gets to that sort of push and pull that we see between budgets and how much it really costs to run a department and how much taxpayers are willing to pay. Somewhere in between there, everybody wants to keep wages as reasonable as possible. I mean, we see this all the time. You guys balance that as select board members. A department wants more money, and you say, well, we don't want the budget to go up that much. So over the last few years, I think we've been underpaying our staff. I think they'd say that they've been underpaid. And when you feel like you're underpaid and the employment situation around you is going up, and you can get paid a lot more working at McDonald's than you can get paid working at night in a dispatch center, people choose different kinds of jobs. And so we've lost staff. And once you start losing staff, we normally have around 13 or 14 employees. Once you start losing staff, you start losing time off. Once you lose time off, you start losing, people work overtime, they're overworked, and it just builds, and it's been building for a number of years. And we got to the point last year where the budget committee and the commission voted for another pay raise for the union employees that were there. And the union thought it wasn't enough money. And so they turned down that contract. And now we're at the point where, because they turned down that contract and there was not enough communication between the two over the last year. Though we were willing to pay more money, they were still working on the year before's salary. So we got to the point a couple of weeks ago where we basically came to the realization that we were going to lose even more employees. The good part is that since I've been a commissioner, which is only since last November, we've been working on a plan with Waldo County for them to take some of the pressure off of Knox. The Knox Regional Communication Center is a PSAP. They answer the 911 calls, and then when they get the 911 calls, they dispatch the calls to whatever surrounding agencies are can best respond to those. So we've been thinking about how we close down the 911, get somebody else to answer that, because there's something in the neighborhood of, I've been told over the last few months, we've been answering approximately 100 911 calls a day in the center. And that's an awful lot of manpower. Dispatching isn't quite the same level because a lot of those 911 calls are mistakes. Some of those 911 calls just require somebody to talk to them. So it doesn't necessarily require a response, and it doesn't require dispatching. One of the problems here was, what does it mean what's the difference between 911 being answered and dispatching? Are they the same thing? No, they're not the same thing. So when there was discussion in the press about it being closed, we were talking about dropping the 911 while we were negotiating a contract with Waldo County to answer the 911. It's fairly complicated. I'm barely on the edges of understanding what happens. But when Knox doesn't answer the 911 call, if it just doesn't answer it, it automatically goes to Waldo County. We have the infrastructure for that to happen automatically. And so we can set it up through the state so that Waldo County now gets those phone calls without any problem. The hard part that we've been working on now is getting the two. One of the reasons Waldo County is a good match is we both use the same computer systems. We're both using Spillman software. Some of the other counties don't use Spillman software. This is a direct connection. We're working on modules at the moment that will work perfectly seamlessly, so that when somebody in Waldo County answers the phone, they fill in the information, it shows up on Knox County's computers. And we're in the process this week of testing that system out. I think the state is watching over what we're doing. And if that works, and I expect it will, because the preliminary tests are all good, we'll be able to do it. So it'll almost be seamless in terms of we're not answering the 911 calls in-house. They will be answered in Waldo County, and then we will dispatch the way we normally do here in Knox County. The manpower issue is being addressed a number of ways. One of the ways we're addressing that is basically ignoring the union contract and giving them more money than they had gotten before. We've raised the wages substantially. I think we are in the process of doing a $9 an hour subsidy on top of the normal wages, $7 for the upper supervisors an hour. So that's made it a lot more attractive to people to come. We still have to deal with the union negotiations in December so that we have a union contract with all of the employees. But there are employees who are thinking, we've signed up a number of employees. I don't know if you get this daily report from the sheriff, who is now running the department. If you aren't, I can make sure that you get them. I can put your emails in the list. What happened was we were at that point where we saw this thing falling apart. And because I'm a commissioner, chair of the commission, the board of commissioners, we have certain responsibilities to the taxpayers, to the citizens. And one of those is public safety. And communications is integral to public safety. And if it's not working right, it's my fault. It's my responsibility to make sure it goes right. So we stepped in a little more than we probably have in the past,
and said, this is what we're going to do. We reassigned some of the positions so that the sheriff is now basically leading the charge and getting this whole thing changed. We get to the point where I think we have a good system in place right now to sort of smooth it over the next 6 months, because it takes a certain amount of time to train new people. It's going to take a while. The problem is we don't want to be in the same situation in the future. I don't know exactly what the mechanism is going to be. It may be changing the governance model. And if that's the case, we are in the process of hiring a consultant of some sort to look at the department, to look at other departments through New England. Chief Farley has also been looking at some of the other departments in New Hampshire to see what we can do so that we don't get in this position again. We know that we have to get more input from the towns. We know that we have to get more input from the community just in general, but the towns are members of this organization, and I'm sure that you guys don't know what's going on, haven't known what's going on, and there's got to be more of that communication between us if we're going to make this thing work in the future. So we stand basically looking at the future and saying, I don't know where we're going to go. We can't do, when people talk about rebuilding the department, we can't do what we've been doing and do it over again because it's not going to work. We know where it's going to lead us. So what we want to do is figure out and bring something to all the towns, because you all have a contract with the county to provide this service. And so we may have to, obviously, if we change this department, we're going to have to come back to you with another contract. And what is it going to mean? And we want to get you involved with that discussion about how we're going to restructure the department. Whew. Is that enough stuff? Have I said too much? What other questions you have?
So, Commissioner Glazer, we got into a situation where none of us were aware that this was about to happen. I would be remiss not to bring it up that somebody at the county had to know that you were reaching crisis level. Why wasn't action taken at the county level? Why wasn't it told to the towns, that we're taking action because we're approaching crisis? We have paid, as I understand it, we've paid our bill for the Regional Communications Center. You had a contractual obligation to the town of Camden for one. Why wasn't this making decisions and making changes from a crisis standpoint is not nearly as effective as making changes in changing conditions when you're in a powerful position, or when you're in a position where you don't have to make crisis decisions? Why wasn't that done?
I don't know. There are a lot of steps along the line and a lot of people along the line who knew this was happening. This is not, we didn't know it was going to get to the point where it was a crisis. We knew we were losing employees. We got to the point a month or so ago where we knew we were going to lose another employee or two, which was going to bring us to the crisis stage at that point. The way it's currently structured is there is an executive board, which is made up of a number of people, of 7 people, who are supposed to represent the towns. And then there's also a users group, which includes almost anybody who is a first responder in Knox County. Any one of those people could have been or should have been responsible for filling in every single town in terms of what's going on. We are, as elected officials, we are commissioners, and we are supposed to represent our citizens too, and we're supposed to communicate with everybody too. I think some of the commissioners feel that they were kept in the dark too, weren't informed what was happening. I think we have probably a textbook case of just lack of communication throughout the whole system.
Before Sheriff Pokey was made head of this, who was responsible for, who was day-to-day responsible for overseeing this department?
The county has a number of departments, and each one, like any other, we have, the head of the department is Bob Coons, who is an excellent dispatcher.
What's his job title?
What's that?
What's his job title?
I don't know exactly the name of it. It's, I think he was the director of the KRCC.
Okay, and is he still employed by the KRCC?
Yes,
Okay, but now he's under the supervision of Sheriff Pokey.
yes.
Who was he supervised by before?
Say that
Who
again?
was his supervisor before?
Well, he went directly to the county administrator.
I mean,
Please.
I guess, I could sit around and micromanage, well, why didn't this person do this? And I could start Googling things. And obviously none of this is my area of expertise. We hope that we hire people. We hope that we elect people who hire people who know how to do this, and alert elected officials when they need to be alerted. But to me, and I know you're new, and I thought it was awesome when you ran for this position and that you're not to blame for the state of the county. And I appreciate it's a very brave thing for you to say, oh, sure, I'll go to Camden and be the representative to try to explain this. So I know that this is like you're trying to make things better and you're not responsible for the way it is. But to me, it would be like a really bad sign if we had a failure in our EMS or any, police or anything. And they said, you know what, the best thing to do, let's take one of our select board members and get them more involved and send them around to talk about this and figure out how to solve it. Like when elected officials have to get involved at this level in the operational part of it and figuring out what went wrong. And okay, if we're going to say to Audra, you know what, we'd like Jeremy to be in charge of this and so-and-so to be in charge of this. And we want Randy to do this. That would mean there's a really big problem because the person that, there's supposed to be one person that reports to you guys for the most part. And so having observed the county for a while, and it's obviously very easy to look from the outside of government and look into another government and say, oh, Camden's a mess or the county's a mess or all of that. But it does seem like there needs to be a look overall, not just at dispatch, which was already in very poor condition before. I already got questions from people all the time about when we switched from being able to just call our local dispatch and then we switched, we're going to save all this money. It was going to be efficient. We're going to have to call the county. And it feels very impersonal and odd. And to try to explain to people that they need to call the county dispatch to tell somebody, about parking on the sidewalk or anything like that. It was this big education process to try to explain to people that the right thing to do is to call dispatch. And now we're having to undo all of that. Now I'm like, they are just at their brink. So we don't want to tell anybody to call dispatch. But I guess the short point that I would like to make is, can you have this consultant that's supposed to be looking at the structure of government, not just look at your dispatch service and how to handle all that, but how we might restructure the whole thing?
We have talked about it. I would say that I don't know that it's the same consultant we want to get involved. We would like to have somebody who deals with public safety talk about public safety. And then organizationally, we probably need to hire somebody to look at the whole organization of the county.
And the charter and how that works. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking, can we join Waldo County? We used to be a part of Waldo County. And is that, at one point it was changed and maybe Waldo County makes more sense for us.
You certainly
is that
can. I
something that
mean,
we
you
can-
are, on a contract basis with the county. And if
or I
you
mean, the
decide
county
that
that we're a part of.
that going to Waldo County makes sense, I mean, certainly that's something that is within your ability to look at.
No, I think
I
the
don't
state
know,
might have to do
but-
that.
But I think one point about what we've done is there has been no interruption in service. Everybody's worried about it. And it's come out that, it's close to not being operating the way it's supposed to, but it is operating the way it's supposed to. And it has been operating the way it's supposed to the point where I believe there are people who say that Knox County dispatching, when we dispatch, is better and gives more information to first responders than Waldo County does.
Well, I'm glad it's a good experience for first responders, but I have not found it to be a good experience for people calling a lot of the time. It just doesn't feel, it feels like we're seeing that there's this meltdown taking place. And the solution is we're going to get a few more commissioners more actively involved, and that the person that is supposed to be overseeing the union contract negotiation and all of these things, that also oversees the all of the other departments that may or may not be thriving at the county, that we're bringing one additional person or rearranging job titles, but that's the only thing that's really happening. And there's just more fragmentation. It doesn't feel like a good solution. It feels like you're doing what you can, but
Commissioner Glazer, do you think that accountability is good at the county right now? Do you think that we've held, there's good accountability? The commissioners are holding the administrators accountable, and the administrators are holding various employees down the line accountable, and then it goes back up the ladder in the same regard. Is that happening at the county level right now?
Not as well as it should, obviously. I mean, that's, the point is, this is where we are, and it hasn't worked. I would say, just because this is the kind of personnel kind of discussion that everybody has as an elected official, that I can't really talk about it, what we're doing and what we hope to do. I'm sure that Steve Betts will cover this eventually, and you'll read about it in the paper. But we are working towards that. And you're right, it hasn't been. It's obvious to everybody that you can't get to a problem like this if everybody's been doing what they're supposed to.
Okay.
There's just no way around that. Yeah.
I think what I'm hearing is from the community is that it does seem to be a top-down management problem, and not seeing any physical accountability had, how do we in 6 months not anticipate that Randy's going to have to take a 911 call on his belt, because now Waldo County is so overridden, but we have all kinds of money in the bank just waiting for a union contract to be passed. I mean, at what point can we not be paranoid that something's going to implode even more?
You're asking me to give you a guarantee.
I know.
I mean, I believe that the plan we have in place and the people we have in place right now are more than capable of dealing with this. We are, because we're offering more money and we've changed the way we're offering per diem. We didn't used to have per diem people. I think we have a good, stable group of people that are looking forward to working for the county. I think at this point, between the per diem people and within the next couple of weeks, we'll probably have access to 10 people to work of the 13 we normally need. Not all of them are going to be fully certified as 911 operators. That takes, because you have to take state classes, that's going to take a while. So it's going to take us the 6 months to get back to being a 911. But in that process, I think we're looking at having enough people. A lot of them are being trained. A lot of them are already trained. The part about per diem is it costs a certain amount more per day, but you're not providing all of those other benefits, the vacation time and the, you know how that works.
Yeah.
So I think it will give us access to people who can do things that we didn't have before, fill in when somebody's taking a vacation, fill in when somebody has a sick day. So I think that part of the mechanism is going to work pretty well. I think, and I don't disagree, we have to find somebody new to run the department. That part. And I think part of that is the way the structure of the KRCC is now, there's an executive board. And that executive board is really advisory to the commission. And I think there's been a breakdown between the communication between that advisory board and the commission. I think there's also been a breakdown in they're only advisory. How come we have a citizens group in something like that that's only advisory? They should have a certain amount of teeth in what they do. So when I talk about governance, I think we have to get whoever is working as an advisor or on this committee or make it a bigger committee has to have more power over what's going on because it's not working.
To me, that just sounds like the answer to this being a bigger committee can't possibly be the right solution. You have what is the county administrator's job? If Audra were failing to oversee one of her departments, we would not be suggesting a committee that had more power to oversee the department. We need a very strong, capable professional with layers of management that are appropriate, so that the things where you guys action is needed, those things would be brought to you by the county administrator to say, we need to take action in this area. The person in charge of dispatch, is that person hired by you guys or by the county administrator?
By the county administrator.
Yes. So
And did the county administrator ever bring it to your attention that this was approaching crisis level?
We have been working on it. I've been going to the meeting with Waldo County since I was first elected. To
Have
work
any
through,
significant
to
steps?
see if there was a way that Waldo County could help us in terms of training, in terms of getting other people there. I think we knew it was getting, we didn't have enough employees, and we were working on trying to find ways to get more employees. I think.
Did the county administrator ever recommend that you take very decisive and hard?
I'm not going to blame the county administrator. I know that's where all of you seem to be going. It's not appropriate.
Well, my question is,
You want to talk about the
I'm just gonna
structure of
ask a
the county,
question.
That's fine. But
Commissioner, I'm going to ask a question. Did the county administrator ever recommend taking strong and decisive action? You said you joined in November. From November until when the crisis hit, did he ever say, we need to raise wages immediately? We need to go into crisis mode. We need to take action and really forcefully recognize the problem and recommend solutions.
we only got to the point where it was a crisis when we were just at the point where we lost 2 employees. Then we all snapped into action, as it were. Before that, we were muddling along, hoping to get more people signed up and working. We knew it was we were overworking people.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but the word that I caught there is hoping. This is an essential service. This isn't the person who's mowing the lawn, right? This is an essential service, and you were going on hope.
there's all of that federal money I've been reading about it where you just recognized a crisis with the sheriff's department and did an emergency thing where you took some of that money and gave it to the sheriff deputies. And then that created this ripple effect where everybody else had to react because we were trying to compete with the county. And why wasn't this recognized as, I would think that would have contributed to it. And that's where I think the fact that we even have to get into this level of detail strategizing about how to incentivize employees and recruit employees and all of that stuff it's not appropriate when it has to be through a brainstorming session like this. This is where we need recommendations. And tonight, and going forward, we have to make a decision. Should the town of Camden be trying to make emergency preparations to be able to deal with this on our own? Or do we want to put more resources into trying to work more with whatever plan you guys are coming up with? And so that's why we're asking these questions, not because we need to get to the bottom of how you guys are going to do your jobs, but we need to decide whether we feel good trying to hook our cart to that horse or doing something else. And I think we all want to, the easiest thing is for us all to feel like, oh yeah, they've got to, I was hoping to hear after reading this in the paper and hearing it on Maine Public Radio, I was hoping to be able to contact a couple of people and say, oh, no, that was blown out of proportion. We've been talking about this. We've got a plan. It's not really what it seems. But it's been the opposite of that. So at what point, we don't want to be in a position where we're hoping.
Have you been getting the daily updates?
I've seen a few, and it's not encouraging because it seems like it's like the equivalent of us being like, well, Chris, you're going to do this, and you're going to answer the calls on Thursdays, and I'm going to answer it just doesn't, it feels like a lot of hoping, I'm reading. We're figuring out how much we should be paying people. All of that should have been figured out a long time ago. We've been dealing with it in all of our organizations. In Midco Solid Waste, we had to make changes to the contract even after the budget was already approved. We had to know we were going to overrun the budget, all because of these same things that were foreseeable. So the fact that I see in an email by the end of the day, we should know how much we should be paying people and things like that, it just doesn't feel like the magnitude of the problem has been understood. Because how am I to know that the jails aren't at the brink of the same situation, or that next it's going to be that the sheriff's department can't respond? How do we know that there's not that same level of hoping going on? It seems like with even just the elections that all of a sudden it's like we have to appoint people because the county didn't get things on the ballot because a budget committee member needs to be elected, or various things like that. It just feels like a little bit off the rails, and I have no way of evaluating whether that's about to happen somewhere else too. Feels like we should get our own dispatch service. I loved Camden's dispatch service. It was great. I know it was really expensive, but you got to call, you got to talk to somebody that knew what was going on. I think people would be willing to pay for it. I mean, we should be at least knowing what that would cost. I know that it's much better to work with all the towns, and that's what we should be trying to do. But maybe the best bet is for us to be trying to work with all the other towns on our own. I mean, maybe Hope and Camden can do something.
Stephanie or Chris, do you have anything?
I'm interested to hear what Chief Gagné has to say about this.
It's a good segue. Chief Gagné?
Yes, I'll happily defer to Randy.
First, I'd say Ed's getting his trial by fire as a commissioner, as you can imagine.
Poor Ed's not even our area. He's coming from the other one.
And I appreciate the fact that he came up and met with Chris and I the other day. This should have never happened. That man right there, Chris Farley, sounded the alarm years ago when he was on the advisory committee as the chair, and it fell on deaf ears. This not only put everybody at risk, our communities, Camden, Rockport, Rockland, Thomaston, we're probably more fortunate. We have full-time police chiefs, fire chiefs, but those outlying communities that don't have that, but they had good representation. I've never seen anything, a quick collaboration of everybody, police, fire, EMS coming together to figure out what we were going to do should 0 hour come. I will say I've had more communication in the last week and a half than I've ever had. I was never one that supported going to county dispatch years ago when it was brought up, but it was the new model and everybody was going to it. I think what is in place right now is a stopgap. And I've said this in the meetings. Pat Polke is a Camden alumni. I promoted him to sergeant when he was here. This is a short-term situation. Pat has enough on his shoulders, and to put this on it as well is not right. But It's a step in the direction of getting some stabilization. I said at the meeting down there that we should be looking at a 30-day max with this, and we should be looking at a consultant to come in and restructure this dispatch center, start from the ground up, and start putting things together. It's not a long-term situation. It's not a long-term solution. We still have, I think the 28th is when your last employee is going, but you've got some that are coming in the door. So there'll be enough bodies there to keep us going for a while. I told a couple of you the other day that I was looking at the options of getting redundant cell phones that would ring in our cruisers if we needed to take 911 calls. I stayed up a few nights last week trying to figure those things out. You know, sometimes you have to go through these exercises that you don't want to figure out what you can do. I can tell you that Chris and I wasn't going to let this fail if we had to answer those cell phones and give those calls out ourselves. I don't think we're there. I think we need to give the county as much support as we can right now, but we need to go into this cautiously optimistic that this could all still fail. And we do need to look at things like, should we be looking at going into our own dispatch? I don't think that's the best idea for this right now, because finding those people to do that would be incredibly hard. So we do have a functioning communications center right now. They're trying as best they can to get bodies in there to staff those positions. But this is far from over. You know as well as I know, and we had these discussions, that major change has to happen there. I'm not letting my guard down. I probably should have known, but nobody was telling us anything until it got to critical mass here. And then it started filtering out because they needed some help. This is what's going to happen. Not real happy our dispatch service is going to Waldo County. As seamless as it sounds like it's going to be, Waldo County is going to answer the 911 call, and then they're going to redirect it to Knox County. So you're going to lose that ability to keep that caller on the line. Now, that's critical in keeping information going down the pipeline. If my officers are going to an active domestic, active shooter, any of that, it's something that's going to help. It's better than not having 911 at all. And I'm sure that they can work their way through this. But communication there's going to be a lag there. Chris knows more about it. He was on the committee. So I would defer to him on any of that technical part of it. But I'll do whatever I can do to help. I know Chris will do whatever he can. Chris Wytalk in Rockland, Tim Carroll, Tim Hoppy over in Thomaston. We're all willing to do what we can do to assist this, to make this successful. But we've got to have more say in what happens. When you talk about the restructuring, we almost need a board of directors for that. So having an advisory committee that gives you information and you do nothing with it does not help. We need to have a functioning committee that has some say, that has oversight, that maybe it includes members of boards from every town. I'm not one for planning out dispatch futures, but definitely the lights have been turned on, and they're not going to go off again because we should have known. Chris's suggestions and raising the red flag there a long time ago should have been listened to, and it wasn't. How the county fixes that is up to them. I'm not going to get into the personalities of it, but I'm going to go into it myself, cautiously optimistic. I like the fact that we're getting some updates as to what's going on, but those shifts, those positions need to be filled. They need to have good supervision. Tom, I couldn't agree with you more on the oversight and why this didn't happen. I understand your reluctancy to get into personnel issues, but that big picture needs to be looked at and looked at by many. I'll answer any questions you have. Like I said, if I have to answer the damn phone myself, I'll do it. I'll make sure somebody's getting there. I shouldn't have to. Our community members should go to bed at night knowing that if they call 911, they are going to get the proper services. And we need that pledge from the county that that's going to happen. If it's not, let's start planning our own. That's what I got to say.
Allison?
What about also, there's 911 and then there are all the other reasons that dispatch gets called also, which might be really important, but not urgent when somebody has information that they want to give and they call, a lot of people are still trained to call 236-3030. It's
Those are
never
still-
enjoyable to end up on the phone with, rarely enjoyable to end up on the phone with dispatch when you used to just be able to talk to a Camden police officer.
That's a
But
quality control issue with the contracting agent that it's supplying service to us, and that's something that'll need to be addressed.
Is that separate from the county's dispatch? When somebody calls?
Business calls,
What is the
I
number?
will still route down to the Knox County Regional Communications.
right, as they
Center.
have been.
Yeah.
And it's not an enjoyable experience a lot of the time. You feel like you've been told that you're supposed to call that number to report these things. And now I understand better all of that attitude and the frustration from that. It's not everybody there, but knowing what the situation is there, I now understand why they find certain things so annoying. But
There is no
I'm complaining all the time to Randy, like, you told me to call them, but now for this, and they act like,
excuse
yeah.
for getting poor service on the phone. However, I will say that some of those dispatchers, the only ones remaining, some of them had worked in excess of 90 straight days, 12-hour shifts a day.
Right,
I can see how some of that probably would come out on let's say a de minimis call.
right, a sidewalk parking call.
Yeah, well, I
can just say it. I
I'm
call
not going to
about
say that.
sidewalk parking because,
But that's still no excuse.
but that's that's part of the service too, because when somebody's parked on a sidewalk and a wheelchair can't get through and they have to go around and you feel like you're stopping 911, and I had no idea that they were facing such issues. So that's all still going to go directly to Knox County if you call one of those non-emergency.
Yes.
You're absolutely right. There's no excuse. It's where we are and where we've gotten to, and we shouldn't have. And it needs to be addressed.
I think what we need to do is go forward, but we really need to have a good look in the rearview mirror as to why we got here and what we're going to change to make sure that doesn't happen again.
And make a secondary plan, like if all of that fails, then this is what Camden would do, because I'd love to be able to call you on your cell phone all
Well,
the time.
and that's part of when we had 4 dispatchers here. We had
I
20
actually, I have
They've
it, but I
all-
try to
I think
use it
they've all done it.
sparingly. But it was this really nice experience before.
But it was, those dispatchers were mostly Camden residents who worked in the community, who were well-known in the community.
Uh-huh.
And you could call up and talk to Alan Kluge or Diane Moody or Lawrence Dearborn or Charlene Parrish. Everybody knew them because they'd stop into the station and chit-chat. And it was that local knowledge that somebody'd call in and say, oh, well, so-and-so's dog's up by Shell Elms. Well, some of you might know where Shell Elms was, or the old IGA, or the IGA that was on Tannery Lane. They knew that. They had that local knowledge. When that was taken out of town and moved to Rockland, we still have an administrative assistant who Jeff gets lots of walk-in calls for those type of things,
Right.
but it's not the 24-hour. We'd have people that would stop in at 10 o'clock at night to bring the dispatcher in a coffee. It was just that local connection to it. And we did lose that. Sometimes, a bigger, better plan and what everybody's going to, but we also have to look at, we're going to have to get more regional on a lot of different things.
Mhm.
Fire, EMS, policing. I mean, I do Rockport and Camden. We're all fighting for people. It's been so hard to get employees, and it's just not there. And the competitive of pay, and what we're seeing out there, I've never seen pay. Rockland went $7 an hour across the board to get people in, and they're filling their ranks. The sheriff's department is now suffering because of that. Not blaming Rockland, because Thomaston is offering very good wages. Some of them are working 36-hour weeks, being paid for 40, and their overtime starts after 36 hours. This is a highly competitive market that's out there with very few people coming into it, and they're going where the money is.
We were losing people to county before.
We're getting late. Stephanie, do you have anything you'd like to say? on
Yeah,
this, or questions?
I just wanted to point out that I have talked to a lot of the surrounding towns, and they are on board with supporting the county and being optimistic. Just as Randy says, they echo his, basically every single thing that Randy has said. The board of directors, I mean, this is a top-down management that we just can't fill the seats. And I would recommend that you take his perspective and, I mean, hang on to it like it's a lifeline, because the surrounding towns agree with that approach. And that is very rare that you see the surrounding towns agreeing
And
on an
my
approach.
words here are a lot of mine, but they're also the collaborative that we
Yes.
put together in the last week. I mean, I spent more time with firemen than I ever wanted to,
Right.
but no, it was unbelievable.
Good.
We,
For me too.
it was great to be able to see, not that I wanted to get a call and say, hey, we've got to jump on this. But for us to be able to get together and say, hey,
Yeah.
I'll say it right here. We were about ready to form a coup
Mhm.
and go down and take over the dispatch center if we needed to. It was getting to that point. It didn't have to happen. And, we've cooler heads prevail. We come up with a plan. The county is working on it. They put Pat in there for now. I'll say it as I said it in the other meeting. That's a 30-day with an evaluation at the end of 30 to see where we are. Are we any closer to getting a consultant in here or a new director? Because if that goes 60, it's going to start going downhill real quick.
Right,
And
that needs to
like I
be a
said, I don't
fast
think
track.
it's right to put all that on Pat. He's got enough other stuff going on as the sheriff of the county. And I'm here to help him. Chris is here to help him. And I know all the other fire chiefs from around the county and the police chiefs in the mid-coast area will also be there to help him.
So at this point, you're saying, in addition to his jail duties, he's got the dispatch and 911 duties now too.
And the sheriff's department is no different than the rest of us. They're facing their own staffing issues.
Right,
So,
the jail is also as well, isn't it?
so
That's how we couldn't send anybody to the jail anymore because isn't that?
COVID put in a lot of different regulations, but we have, we've tried to help out the county as far as the jail. We take prisoners to Waldo County. We split, Rockport goes to Knox. We take ours to Waldo. It's not that much of a difference. My officers actually like taking them to Waldo. They've formed a relationship there. And that's also, yes, it is a little further, but you also work on relationships in the northern part, in another county that, these are people that are going to have to be backing up each other. So that pays dividends as well. So
But we pay the county more than any other town.
you're
For
preaching to the
services.
choir. I hear exactly what you're
Do
saying.
we pay Waldo County anything or?
I think that's worked out between the two
I'm telling
jails.
you,
Because the jail
Waldo, just joining
administrator,
Waldo County might be the best bet.
All right, I think we're
Yeah,
we're at 9:30 now. We have a couple more
Everybody's
agenda.
questions for us at downtown.
Sure. Any questions of Chief Gagné? Thank you,
Thank
Chief.
you, Randy.
Commissioner Glazer, I thank you for coming tonight.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Chris, Chief Farley, anything to add?
Nope, Chief Gagnon said we're all committed to helping the county put it back together and build it better than it was, and that's what we're going to do.
Thank you. Thank all three of you for coming tonight. Next discussion item is the statutory changes to the sale of tax acquired property. Audra, could we get a background on that?
Do we want to do a check-in on the time limit, Stephanie?
I'm fine with that. If we want to postpone any of this, it's fine with me.
What are we looking at for?
For this,
Is
I mean,
this essential? Right, I would prefer to,
it's not, and you'd probably give it more time and attention if it weren't so late.
Okay.
Yeah.
Make a motion. Somebody make a motion for me to postpone or to
is that the,
item 9 on the agenda.
So does that take us right to adjournment and then executive session? So should my motion
Correct.
be to?
I would say to table.
I would move that we table items 8B and 9? Or Did you say 9?
Sure, I was
moved on to
mistaken.
9.
Yeah,
I'm
move
sorry.
on to 9, sure.
Okay, I would move that we table 8B and move on to item 9.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor? 4-0, motion carries. Thank you. Item 9, agenda items for upcoming meetings. Any select board members want to suggest items for upcoming meetings? I've already written down EMS.
Affordable housing options.
Okay, so zoning and affordable housing. Allison, I'll add zoning to that, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that basically to look, to review items in our toolkit for addressing that, and maybe with the planning board or with not. And then we are going to do the EMS workshop.
Right.
It's already been established.
We haven't established a date. Do we want to set that now? We initially talked late September. Calendars. We have a select board meeting on the 5th, and I believe on the 19th of September. Obviously, the 26th would be an off date for select board if we wanted to stay with the Tuesday night idea.
So
Support that.
26, we have the,
We do have another workshop that night.
yeah, we do.
What is that one?
So, that was the team building workshop, right?
Team building?
The 26th.
Okay. Any other suggestions for EMS workshop?
Well, is the EMS workshop more important than the team building piece?
Do you have is there a plan in place for either? Okay.
Yeah.
So other dates that would be,
You can change that date. There's a plan in place, but the date's flexible if you want to do EMS on the 26th instead.
other dates that are available would be on a Tuesday, would be October 10th, October 24th. Those are Tuesdays also.
I'm good with either. I just thought that maybe it's more important than the workshop to do the EMS piece.
I'm good with whatever date anybody throws out
Yep.
there.
Well, what if we were to set the 10th for another workshop and then we can discuss
Sure,
the order of the two workshops?
that's fine.
Okay, October 10th workshop and 6:30 PM?
Yes.
Okay. And Audra, let's come up with a invitation list.
Yep.
An agenda. I can work with you on that.
Yep.
Or if anybody has any suggestions for that, please feel free to email.
How do we go about getting an update on the paid parking and how that's going and the revenues from it and the expenses associated with it?
I can do that at any time you'd like. It might be better if we, do it at the end of the season when we stop
Right.
collecting.
When is that?
So that would be on October 15th.
Okay. Sure. Once you can collect that data, I mean, it might be a little soon to say October 17th, but it could be, say, the first meeting in November.
Yep.
Or the last one in October if
Sure, yeah.
1 or 2 days is enough to get it together.
Yeah, we can, when we're doing agenda setting, we can
Okay.
see where we're at
Sure.
at that point. Yep.
We want so I had been hoping for just like an update that would help me answer questions, but that's not going to help me for this if we do it then, which is fine. But would it be better, what's the role of the parking advisory committee at this point? Do we want them to review stuff and then bring it to us? Or are we replacing the role of the advisory committee with us? When I had said before that I wanted an update on the parking stuff, it was like, I guess, little things, so to speak, like why are
Yeah,
the
no, I know
fees
what you mean.
doubling if somebody doesn't pay within 7 days and things like that, that I didn't know how to answer. And, but I don't, necessarily know if the select board should replace the parking advisory committee, that if we're looking at I don't know that I'm prepared, I guess, with the knowledge base of,
I was just curious about what's the expense and revenue.
because they had been going through and doing meetings, right? And then you talk about it and they make, maybe you guys.
They did one meeting since I've been on the select board, they
Yeah.
did one meeting. So the 2-year
Pilots.
pilot program is up this year.
Yes.
So it seems to me like it would be a select board decision at this point, I would think.
A select board decision, but I guess the review,
Allison, my opinion is we should do this one time. To do it, to get little questions to answer.
oh no, I'm saying forget about my little questions.
Okay.
I know I was one of the people that was asking for an update. If it's not happening, since it didn't happen early on in the season, I guess my preference would be to make sure that if this is a final review of the program, my preference would be to make sure that that's done well
Yeah.
through whatever, and that might be best, since there has been a committee reviewing this. We have a person or two people on it, you and that.
No, I wasn't on it.
Oh,
I
well.
just went to the meeting.
I do think it would be helpful to get some sort of review and recommendation from that group, because they were really engaged, even though they've only met once once this year. They did meet quite a few times when John Burke was doing his study, and they were really engaged in sort of developing the pilot. And it's not just the pilot, there's other things to talk about and think about and other recommendations that they might make. So I do think that, we can do two things, which is just sort of giving you the year-end review in terms of like revenue and that kind of thing. But I also think that there's a broader policy conversation to be had. And we had a group that was having that, inputting into that and giving recommendations, and they're pretty engaged in it. So I do think it would be beneficial.
Maybe we could add
to-
Stephanie as an
Did we-
actual member of that.
Did we invite people to be a part of that, or did they just show up?
We invited people.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I know that some of those people have changed jobs and won't be available.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like, we had the, I think it was Tom
right.
Tom
Well, that's
Pico
right.
started as like the
Right.
chamber
So
president.
I was
So
kind of thinking that,
We can-
having a big workshop to.
I guess my question would be like discussion and action. I'm with Chris. I'd like to get an update, and I think that's a discussion item.
yes.
Okay.
I also think that we need to have an action item, and we'll need some input from you, because if we're going to move from pilot to permanent or go for, whatever next summer of 2024, we should have a broad action item discussion regarding that. And I think maybe it's a big enough item for the town that we could have a discussion with revenues and expenses once those are calculated. And then we could move forward sometime in the winter or the spring, whenever you say we need to make a decision by,
Yeah.
and make sure that we have that discussion as an action item.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the recommendation that came out of that committee last, it wasn't just to expand the pilot program another year. It was expand the pilot program another year before you implement it across the downtown.
Okay.
And that, like Stephanie said, people have changed. Figuring out how that's going to work, if that's what everybody wants to do, there's a lot that goes into that. So, I think it's a bigger conversation, and and having a group that can sort of dig into the details of that and bring you guys recommendations on a variety of things is going to be really helpful, because it's a really complicated topic. There's a lot of really important, believe it or not, it touches on the affordable housing conversation we have. This is one of the tools in our toolboxes. So I think that understanding how that all fits together is going to be really important. I'd even recommend bringing John Burke back for some of this, because it has been a few years since, we got word out to the public about this and had those sort of presentations and did a little bit of education on it. So I think that that's all going to be really important, because I think, this is not popular. We're not proposing to do something that's popular and well liked by people, but it's really important. And it's really important for a lot of reasons. And I think before anybody makes a decision, balancing some of like the trade-offs and what you're gaining and what you're giving up is going to be really important for all of you in making a really informed decision about this. So
Okay.
yeah, for that reason, I think, the initial quick discussion about revenues for the year and then the bigger discussion about like, what are we trying to achieve and the policy implications with a group that's dug into this and been engaged is going to be helpful.
Yeah, and somebody that can explain because this was not at all obvious to me until I had it beaten over my head a few times about understanding like all the affordable housing stuff and it's just, I want to not get it wrong by looking at it quickly.
So are we scheduling that talk?
No, I
or-
think we're giving Audra some flexibility here after October 15th at the nearest possible meeting to give us
First piece, for the discussion piece.
yes, correct.
But
And then the
other
broader
one-
discussion, the action item would be
Yes.
something that we, again, take input from you as to when we need to make decisions by in order to give a thumbs up or thumbs down for future programs.
What about another piece concerning the same area, is establishing some sort of standard for paid use of public property.
Oh, the public landing.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's paid use of public property that we have for spaces. What sort of metric are we or should we use? So in Sophie's word, it's not a lottery of, gee, my thing got through versus another one that didn't.
I agree.
There needs to be some sort of something. And that goes to strategy and direction on use of those spaces and to compete or not to compete with tax-paying brick and mortar businesses.
Mm-hmm.
But something needs to be in place so that there is direction on this board or future boards on
So what I could do is
approval and denials.
if this would be helpful, I can sort of go back to my staff and we can start drafting, a policy just as a starting point.
Mhm.
And then we can bring it to a meeting as a discussion item. And so, that gives you a place to kind of
Something to
start
get
the
started.
conversation.
Yeah, it's important. It's an important space.
And how other municipalities do it, as you always do. That's always great information.
Could we start with what we have now for existing agreements?
Oh, I see. Like,
Because
Harbor
that
Dogs
seems,
and-
that every time something comes up, then it's somebody else comes up and says, well, I have to pay this for this. And if we could at least, because policies always sound good, but then when you get into the details of who it affects, I'd just like to know all of the agreements that we have on the public landing
Mhm.
for use of public space. And ideally, we would expand that to all of our public spaces, but that might be too
Mm.
much of a,
I think if you're going to make a list, let's make a list of all the public
Make a list.
spaces. At least a list. So we know what we're committed to. Yep.
Janice said, oh, I've got that all in a,
She does. It's in a big old binder.
Okay. Anything else to add to the agenda items for upcoming meetings? Great. Can I get one more motion? Item number 11, which is adjournment.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I just really want to ask if anybody knows what the tower is on top of the Opera House. Is there a least like antenna? Does anybody,
On top of
is
the
that,
opera
can that be on the
house.
list if there is one? I second the motion. Sorry.
Motion made and seconded. All those in
I always
favor?
forget that. I always really want to ask.
4-0.
Ask Stephanie if she knows.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for a good meeting.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go to the bathroom really quick.
I do wonder, is that when Red Zone came in
Mhm.
and put up their cell phone tower because they couldn't do it up on the smokestack?
I
feel like that
wonder
might be
about
it.
like if somebody, like,
How much
was I- is that remember when there was gonna be like free, for-
public space
there's gonna be a,
How many-
like is somebody
how many
making money
RVs
that's
are
having
there?
a,
It's like what, Lake Beach and
I was hoping maybe we'll figure out when we do the roof. Anyway, I thought maybe it was like an EMS thing, like a